You stand beneath the stars a little too awake maybe for this late hour. The moon hangs low, silver, sleepy watching. You pull the blanket closer, the soft fabric hugging your shoulders as the night settles in around you like a fog of forgotten time. But your mind won't settle, because in the distance, through the veil of dreams and time, you sense something vast, something old, something impossibly terrifyingly precise. Now close your eyes. Imagine a stone the size of a city bus, not one, but three. Each carved, lifted and placed with such uncaring confidence that they sit there today thousands of years later, unbothered by earthquakes, empires, or reason. This is where you begin on a high plateau in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, surrounded by stones so heavy cranes today wouldn't dare lift them. Welcome to Baalbek. It doesn't announce itself. There are no neon signs or polite brochures. Just the wind rustling dry grass brushing against the bones of history. Your steps crunch over gravel older than your family name. And then you see it, the Trillathon. 3 stones each, over 800 tons, some say more than 1,000, stacked together like dominoes made by giants. And beneath them, more stones, even bigger. You run your fingers along the surface, rough but strangely uniform, like it was sliced rather than chiseled. No tool marks, no inscriptions, no instructions. Just the stubborn, silent weight of the impossible. Archaeologists tell you this was a Roman temple dedicated to Jupiter. Sure. And yet, the Romans themselves built on top of this platform. As if they found it, marveled at it, and thought, well, this'll do. That's not typical Roman behavior. These were people who built everything from scratch, with flair, and a fair amount of marble. So why here did they settle for second place? Historians still debate whether these stones were moved with levers and manpower, or whether they were part of an older construction, one lost to time. But here's the problem. Nothing adds up. The technology to quarry, transport, and position these blocks across uneven terrain with millimeter precision simply did not exist in any culture we know from that period. It's like someone handed the blueprints for a skyscraper to a village carpenter and said, figure it out. Except the carpenter did figure it out. Somehow. Or didn't. Maybe he just found the pieces lying around. And that's the part that gets you the not knowing. The little itch in your mind that won't go away. Maybe the Romans did what we always do when we stumble across something we don't understand. We build on top of it. We give it a name. We pretend it was ours. You lean against the cool stone. It's cold, like the breath of something ancient. You wonder who touched it last. Not the last tourist, not the last archaeologist, but the first. Who placed this here? What were they trying to hold up or hold down? Theories swirl like the sand around your feet. Some say ancient giants, literal ones, built Baalbek. Others whisper of advanced civilizations wiped out by floods, by fire, by their own brilliance. Still others point their fingers skyward, imagining flying machines and alien visitors with tractor beams and good intentions. But the truth stays silent, just like the stones. You won't find your answers in textbooks. You'll find them here in the hush of ancient places, in the creak of night air, in the echoes of forgotten footsteps. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And if you're still awake, post your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where my fellow wanderers are listening from tonight. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan, for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. Because this story, it's not in your history books, it's under your feet. And Baalbek is just the first whisper in a long, dark conversation. You wake up, or maybe you never really fell asleep, and find yourself walking through the highlands of Lebanon. The night is warm, but not stifling. The stars, blinking softly above like they know something you don't. The dust on your boots is ancient, layered with centuries of forgotten footsteps. And ahead of you, dimly lit by moonlight, is something that feels impossibly out of place, the platform of Baalbek. Even from a distance, it doesn't look real. It looks like a movie set or a matte painting that forgot to fade into the background. But the closer you walk, the more tangible it becomes. Stone upon stone carved and positioned so precisely that the gaps between them are barely the width of a human hair. And then there's them, the trilithon stones. So massive, they don't just defy explanation, they laugh at it. The largest among them weighs more than 1,000 tons. 1,000 tons. That's the equivalent of about 150 African elephants, or if you prefer your comparisons more industrial, 2 fully loaded Boeing 747s. And these aren't stones that just happen to be lying around. They were quarried, transported uphill, and set into place with such flawless alignment that modern laser levels might as well give up. You pause and place your hand on the surface. The limestone is cool, the temperature stubbornly resisting the heat of the day. It feels like you're touching the casing of a dormant machine, like any moment it might hum to life. You try to imagine the kind of person or being who could have moved such stones. You picture ropes, pulleys, men shouting and heaving in unison, sweat darkening the dirt. But then you remember the incline, the lack of sufficient tools, the total absence of written records explaining how it was done. Historians still debate whether these megaliths were ever even intended to be part of a completed structure. Some argue they were left unfinished, too large to maneuver, abandoned as a mistake of ambition. But that doesn't explain the others. Smaller, but still massive blocks are neatly fitted into place below them. That doesn't feel like a mistake. That feels like intention, purpose. And here's where it gets even weirder. The Romans did build here. That's not a theory, it's a fact. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek is one of the largest religious sanctuaries in the Roman world. But the foundation, the thing that temple rests on, doesn't match Roman construction techniques. The stones are too large, the placement too advanced. It's as if the Romans found the base and said, well, that's convenient, and built their temple on top. So either the Romans had access to forgotten technology, something we've never found, never documented, or they were piggybacking off someone else's genius. And if so, who? There's no shortage of theories. One posits that Baalbek was a landing pad for alien ships, the stones providing a stable base for crafts that needed a smooth, massive surface. It sounds ridiculous, until you try to come up with a better explanation. Another theory suggests a lost civilization. Perhaps Atlantean, perhaps something older, had advanced engineering capabilities, possibly even anti-gravity mechanisms that allowed them to maneuver these stones like Lego bricks. But no matter how deep you go, no one can tell you why. Why go to this much trouble? Why build with such colossal stones when smaller ones would have done the job just fine? Theories abound, but answers are scarce. And it's not just the size, it's the shape, the orientation. The entire platform at Baalbek is aligned with surprising astronomical precision. Some researchers argue it was designed to track celestial bodies. Others believe it channels telluric energy, Earth's natural vibration. Whether you lean towards science or mysticism, one thing's clear: this wasn't random. You sit on a nearby boulder, catching your breath, not from exertion, but from the weight of questions piling up. The night air buzzes faintly, and you start to hear things. Not voices, not exactly. More like memories embedded in stone. Echoes. Maybe you're tired, or maybe this place remembers more than it lets on. The truth is, we don't like mysteries. Not really. We like puzzles. We can solve patterns we can explain. Baalbek refuses to be solved. It sits there, year after year, storm after storm, ignoring our questions. Maybe that's why it's not as famous as the Great Pyramid or Stonehenge. We haven't figured out how to package it into a neat narrative. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Baalbek isn't here to give you answers. Maybe it's here to remind you how little we know. Just before you drift back into the edges of sleep, one last image forms in your mind: a long-forgotten builder, thousands of years ago, guiding one of these stones into place. No machines, no cables, just a knowing smile and a technology we'll never understand. You're not sure if that's a dream or a memory, but the stone beneath your fingertips, that's real. The sky shifts overhead as you leave Lebanon behind the stars, wheeling slowly, while the night air carries you eastward into the heart of southeastern Turkey. You don't feel the motion. One moment, you're among monolithic blocks stacked like toy bricks, and the next, you're standing atop a rocky hill. The ground beneath your feet is dry, dusty, and strangely quiet. And then you see them, rising from the earth like half-remembered dreams, stone pillars taller than a man carved with beasts that no longer exist. This is Göbekli Tepe. You've never seen anything like it. And frankly, neither has archaeology. Discovered in the 1990s, this site shattered everything we thought we knew about human history. For decades, textbooks claimed the first major human structures came only after agriculture, after people had settled down, planted wheat, and figured out cities. But Göbekli Tepe, it was built nearly 12,000 years ago, before the wheel, before written language, before farming. You crouch beside one of the towering T-shaped monoliths, your fingers brushing the surface of an intricately carved fox. Not just a shape, an expression, stylized yet deliberate. There are snakes, vultures, lions, even what looks eerily like a headless human. They're not random. They're stories, perhaps, warnings, maybe, the kind that don't need words because they're older than language itself. Historians still debate whether Göbekli Tepe was a temple, a meeting place, or a ritual site. But one thing's clear: it wasn't just built by a tribe of wandering foragers throwing rocks together. This place required planning, architecture, mathematics, labor coordination, and all of it during a time when supposedly humans were still figuring out how to domesticate goats. So how did they do it? No one knows. The pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, were quarried and transported across rocky terrain. No beasts of burden, no carts, no visible roads. Just a shared vision that said, we'll raise these stones to the sky. And then they did. Over and over again for centuries. Layer upon layer. Structure upon structure. And then they buried it. That might be the strangest part of all. Göbekli Tepe wasn't destroyed by enemies or erosion. It was carefully, deliberately filled in, like someone wanted to preserve it or hide it. The dirt was packed tight around each pillar, protecting the carvings so well that when archaeologists finally uncovered them, the images were still crisp after 10 millennia. You sit down in the dust cross-legged like a child, hearing a bedtime story from the earth itself. All around you are shapes not quite human, not quite animal. Some are humanoid figures, with exaggerated arms wrapped around the edges of the pillars like guardians frozen mid-embrace. Others seem almost alien in their abstraction symbols, too old to decode, too recent to forget. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just old. It's out of place. Anachronistic. Like finding a smartphone embedded in a medieval castle wall. The builders of Göbekli Tepe didn't just defy the timeline. They rewrote it. Some researchers propose that the site was built in response to a global catastrophe, perhaps the Younger Dryas impact event, a sudden climate shift around 10,800 BCE. If that's true, then this temple isn't just old, it's a monument to survival, a tribute to memory, a warning perhaps to future generations about what came before and what was lost. You lie back in the dry grass, staring up at a sky that hasn't changed much in 12,000 years. The constellations wheel above, timeless and patient. And you wonder, did the builders look at these same stars? Did they draw meaning from Orion, from Sirius, from the rising and setting of celestial bodies? We now track with apps. There's a quiet debate among scholars. Some claim the carvings at Göbekli Tepe match the constellations as they appeared millennia ago, pointing to a sophisticated knowledge of the heavens. Others say it's coincidence. But there's something about the symmetry, the repetition, the orientation of the pillars. It doesn't feel accidental. It feels like design, and you can't help but feel watched, not in a threatening way, more like observed, as though the stones themselves are waiting to see what you'll do, what you'll remember. A breeze stirs the dry grasses, and the dust rises softly around you. You imagine the first builders, skin tanned from the sun eyes, bright with purpose, hoisting ropes, dragging stone, carving the past into permanence. And you wonder, who were they really? Nomads with genius, survivors of a lost civilization. Something in between. Göbekli Tepe doesn't give you answers, but it hands you the right questions. Why was it built before farming? Why was it hidden so carefully? How did pre-agricultural humans organize such massive sustained effort? And if this is what survived, how much have we lost? You breathe deep, the air thin but charged. Maybe with memory, maybe with meaning, or maybe just the hum of mystery that always lingers where history refuses to behave. The air grows heavier as you drift southwest down through the Nile Valley and toward one of Egypt's most peculiar and underappreciated sites. You've left the dry hills of Turkey behind, and now the horizon glows with sand and shadow. This isn't the Egypt of travel brochures. No camels posed before pyramids. No flashy crowds at the Sphinx. This is older, deeper, submerged in silence and mystery. You arrive at the Osirian. It sits behind the more famous temple of Seti I in Abydos like an afterthought. But you quickly realize that this so-called afterthought has more secrets than the temple it hides behind. You step down a staircase toward it, and the temperature drops. The stones around you darken massive and cold, slick with water. Water in the middle of the desert. Yes, the Osirian is partially submerged, fed by the water table that creeps up from below. And yet, despite the damp, the structure still stands megalithic and deliberate. Giant granite blocks form the walls and pillars, some weighing upwards of 100 tons. Each one is cut so precisely that they seem to interlock without mortar, their edges smooth and silent as a sigh. You pause and rest your hand against one of these blocks. It's not limestone, like most other ancient Egyptian architecture. It's pink granite transported from Aswan, over 120 miles away. How? With what boats' ramps, maybe. But moving and lowering multi-ton blocks into a pit filled with groundwater seems optimistic at best. Archaeologists have long attributed the Osirian to Seti I, claiming it was built as part of his temple complex around 1290 BCE. But here's where things get weird. The Osirian's architectural style looks nothing like the structures of Seti's time. It's more primal, more raw. In fact, it closely resembles far older constructions, megalithic sites that predate dynastic Egypt by millennia. You look around and notice something else. There's almost no decoration, no cartouches, no hieroglyphs boasting of royal deeds. Just pure, unadorned stone. That might not seem like a big deal, but in Egypt, it's almost unheard of. Pharaohs loved carving their names into everything. If Seti, I built this place, why leave it blank? Historians still debate whether the Osirian was truly his work, or whether he merely found it, respected it, and decided to incorporate it into his temple complex, like a man finding an ancient relic in his backyard and building a porch around it. And really, can you blame him? The more you walk through the hall, the more it feels like a place out of time. Even the atmosphere is different. Echoes bounce strangely. Footsteps sound softer than they should. You lean down and touch the surface of the pool surrounding the central chamber. The water is still reflecting not just your face, but something else. The suggestion of something beneath, something waiting. You look up, and now the alignment starts to make sense. The Osirian is oriented along cardinal points. Some believe it was once part of a larger astronomical complex. Others think it was built to resonate with the sacred geometry of the Earth itself. A few fringe researchers even claim it channels vibrational energy, something to do with granite's natural piezoelectric properties. Touch it just right, they say, and the stone sings. And then there's the name Osirian, tied to Osiris, the god of the underworld of resurrection and the afterlife. Fitting, isn't it? A sunken structure older than the pharaohs, forgotten by history, but never quite erased. It sits in darkness, half submerged, yet undeniably present. Much like Osiris himself, who was dismembered, scattered, and then reassembled to rise again. You step into the central chamber, where columns loom like petrified giants. Water laps quietly against stone. No tourists here, no crowds. Just you, and the weight of thousands of years. You wonder, was this a temple, a tomb, a machine? That's not a joke. Some modern researchers have floated the idea that the Osirian wasn't ritualistic at all, but functional. A machine of some kind, perhaps to harness or stabilize energy, perhaps to preserve something or someone. But what really makes the Osirian so strange is its context. It doesn't fit, not with its surroundings, not with its supposed date, not even with the mythology it's attached to. It's like a piece from an entirely different puzzle. And maybe that's because it is. You lie on the cool stone floor, staring up at the opening above, where the moon casts silver light in sharp angles across the granite. You think about how much time has passed, how many stories have come and gone since these blocks were first placed here, how many floods, How many droughts? How many forgotten names? And yet the Osirian remains. It's possible we're wrong about it all. About the date. About the builders. About the purpose. Maybe this structure doesn't belong in Egyptian history books at all. Maybe it belongs in the blank space that comes before, when humanity was not quite ready, but someone was. What if this place isn't a relic? What if it's a breadcrumb? A clue left behind by a civilization that knew something we've long forgotten. You don't get the answer? Not tonight. Just a quiet ripple in the pool and the echo of your own heartbeat, slowing now steady as the stone. The Osirian won't give you answers, but it will make you ask better questions. And sometimes, that's the only way history speaks. You drift again, and this time, the ocean welcomes you. Not a tranquil cruise ship kind of ocean, but one that hums with stories, salt and memory. Stars reflecting off dark water as your dream self floats across the Pacific. And somewhere far from any mainland, small black shapes begin to rise from the surf. You arrive at Nan Madol. It's almost laughable how few people have heard of it. An ancient city built atop a coral reef, stretching across nearly 100 artificial islets. A place some have called the Venice of the Pacific, though that's selling it short. Venice has gondolas and crumbling facades. Nan Madol has floating megaliths, basalt columns stacked with inexplicable skill, and channels that wind like watery alleyways between ruins no one truly understands. The moon hangs overhead, and everything gleams wet and black. You're standing on Pohnpei, a remote island in Micronesia. But nothing about this place feels small or remote. The construction is so ambitious, so strange, it whispers of forgotten grandeur. This isn't just a settlement. It feels like a secret capital from a civilization lost to the sea. The city was built out of more than 750,000 tons of columnar basalt. The stones aren't carved so much as chosen shaped naturally into hexagonal columns by volcanic forces, then stacked and fitted with uncanny precision. Like giant versions of Lincoln logs, except each log weighs several tons and had to be dragged across water to get here. You look around. No quarries in sight, no roads, no signs of cranes or pulleys or any mechanical aid. The people credited with building Nan Madol, the Sotoler dynasty, had no metal tools, no wheels, no pack animals. Just boats, logs, ropes, and ambition. Or something else. You step onto one of the platforms, the stones under your feet slick with ocean spray. Beneath you is nothing but water and coral reef. That's right. These aren't stones laid on land. They were placed directly on top of coral, without foundations, without anchors. And yet they've survived storms, salt centuries. You hear a quiet splash and glance over your shoulder. Nothing. Just the sea breathing around the walls. But the stories about Nan Madol are rarely silent. The local legends speak of sorcerers' twin brothers who used magic to levitate the stones into place. They're said to have flown them from a distant quarry, using spells not manpower. It's easy to dismiss that, sure, until you try to figure out how else they did it. Even modern engineers have scratched their heads. How do you move a 10-ton block across miles of ocean, lift it out of a canoe, and then stack it on a reef without sinking or breaking it? Repeatedly, hundreds of thousands of times, historians still debate whether Nan Madol was a royal palace, a religious center, or a prison for nobles. What's not debated is the scale. This was no humble fishing village. This was a sprawling, carefully organized urban site, complete with seawalls, tombs, and temples. And then there's the silence. The city was abandoned centuries ago. No great war, no invading force, no obvious cause. Just a slow fading into the sea. As if whatever force or knowledge built it simply turned off or left. You wander deeper into the ruins, the sound of the ocean echoing between walls that don't feel like ruins. They feel like memory in stone. The blocks lean slightly in places, but still hold strong. Water trickles through channels like forgotten lifeblood. Moonlight pools in open courtyards where once perhaps ceremonies were held. Offerings made, secrets whispered. And the deeper you go, the colder it feels. Some say Nan Madol is cursed. That bad luck follows anyone who tries to live there. Others say it's haunted, that voices whisper over the water. And a few those who look at ancient maps and alignments suspect it's connected to something far older, the lost continent of Lemuria. Now, Lemuria is one of those names you hear tossed around in fringe documentaries and old theosophical texts. A hypothetical sunken land that once stretched across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Supposedly home to a spiritually advanced race. No proof of its existence, and yet, Nan Madol seems to float in the center of those old myths like a breadcrumb. You sit at the edge of a stone platform, your feet dangling just above the dark water. The stars overhead ripple in the ocean's surface, as if reminding you that what's above is reflected below. And maybe what's below has always been watching. You close your eyes and picture what this place must have looked like in its prime. Firelight bouncing off wet basalt. Priests or kings drifting through torchlit channels. Songs echoing between walls now crumbling into tide pools. But none of that remains. Now there's just you, the sea, and a city that shouldn't be here. That can't be here, and yet here it is. When you open your eyes again, everything is still. The waves calm. The night holds its breath. You stand, you walk, you leave Nan Madol behind, but it doesn't leave you. Not really, because once you've stood in a city built on the sea from stone, no one could have moved by hands. No one remembers. The world never feels quite the same again. The moon follows you west, drifting slowly across the sky. As you rise into the thin air of the Andes, the stars seem sharper here, closer somehow, and the ground beneath your feet rumbles with ancient presence. You're standing near the city of Cusco, high in the mountains of Peru, where the walls themselves look like puzzles left unsolved. This is Sacsayhuaman, a name that sounds like a joke when spoken aloud, but feels anything but funny when you're face to face with its stones. They're not just big, they're massive. The largest among them weighs over 125 tons. Yet it's not their size that makes your stomach twist, it's how they fit together. Like they were poured into place. Like the mountain itself was convinced to rearrange its molecules to obey geometry. You walk slowly along the base of the wall, trailing your fingers across the seams. There's no mortar. None. And yet not even a blade of grass can squeeze between the stones. Some are angled, some curve, others are deeply indented, and yet they all lock together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle with no repeated pieces. And it's not just one wall. It's 3 levels of zigzagging perfection, snaking across the hillside like a lightning bolt frozen in stone. The design is thought to represent the jaguar, a sacred symbol of strength and protection in Incan cosmology. Or maybe it's just incredibly functional, shock-resistant, earthquake-defying, stubbornly immobile. You pause and tilt your head. Something's off. The stones vary wildly in shape and size. There's no uniformity, No obvious reason for the chaos. And yet the chaos works. Not one wall has collapsed in all the centuries since it was built. Not even when the Spanish tore much of it down to build churches. And here's the strange part. No one knows how the Inca, or whoever came before them, achieved this level of stonecraft. The Inca, when asked by the Spanish how they constructed such walls, answered simply, "They were here before us," as if to say, "We inherited this, not built it, not planned it, inherited." Like a castle, you don't question because you grew up inside it. You climb a few feet to stand atop one of the higher platforms. From here, the view is breathtaking. The city of Cusco sprawls in the valley below the mountains, rise like frozen waves, and the wall behind you curves like a sleeping serpent. Historians still debate whether Sacsayhuaman was a fortress, a ceremonial site, or both. What's not debated is its brilliance. The angular stones absorb seismic shock waves. When earthquakes hit the walls, flecks absorb and settle while modern buildings crack and tumble. You run your hand across a stone face again. The polish is subtle, but it's there. These weren't rocks tossed together by brute force. They were shaped with meticulous care. No chisel marks, no visible tool grooves, just smooth, tight surfaces and curves that should have required powered machinery. But the Inca didn't have steel, or wheels, or pulleys, according to conventional timelines. So how did they cut and shape these stones, some of which are andesite, a material harder than granite? The official answer is with stone hammers. That's right. They supposedly hammered away with smaller rocks until the massive stones took shape. You try to imagine it. Generations of laborers pounding and grinding day after day for years just to fit one block into place. Maybe. But then you look again at how the stones nest together like soft clay molded by giant hands, and that theory starts to feel shaky. Some researchers propose that the builders may have used unknown techniques, possibly even softening the stone itself through chemical or vibrational processes. A few fringe theories speak of sound technology lost to time that could shape rock the way ultrasound can manipulate fluid today. It sounds wild, sure, but then again, look around. You explore a little deeper and come across something most tourists miss: a stone carved in the shape of a serpent, woven into the wall as if it were always part of the rock. It's not just symbolism, it's integration. A union of art, architecture, and engineering that modern civilization can barely imitate. You sit down on a worn boulder and take a breath. The air is thinner here, cleaner. You wonder what this place looked like in its prime crowds gathered for ceremonies. Priests in gold headdresses, fires burning in offering bowls. Was it a fortress defending against enemies, or a temple opening to the sky? You don't know. No one does. Because like so many ancient sites, Sacsayhuaman was partially erased. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they saw these massive stones and didn't marvel, they dismantled. They took what they could carry to build cathedrals in Cusco and left the biggest stones alone because even they couldn't move them. But the foundations remain defiant, whole, unexplained. The sun begins to rise beyond the mountains, casting light through thin clouds. The shadows of the walls stretch long across the earth. You realize the layout of the site follows more than topography. It follows celestial alignments. Some stones line up with solstices, others with constellations. It's not just a wall. It's a calendar, a code, a memory made solid. And you wonder How many other walls in the world are we walking past, never thinking to ask what they once meant? How many of them carry the fingerprints of a civilization we've chosen to forget? You rise your body, warmed by the high-altitude sun, your mind heavy with questions. Saksai Waman doesn't ask for your belief. It doesn't even ask for your understanding. It just stands unmoving, silent and complete, a monument to a knowledge we've misplaced. And maybe, just maybe that knowledge isn't lost. Maybe it's waiting. You're still high in the mountains, but your next step feels like a plunge downward into geometry, mystery, and stone, so ancient it seems immune to erosion time or even curiosity. You don't descend in elevation, exactly. You descend in meaning. Because now you're standing at the base of the most famous structure in the world, the Great Pyramid of Giza. You've seen it in pictures, documentaries, school books. But none of that prepares you for the first real look. It doesn't loom, it waits. It doesn't sparkle. It stares. Massive, mathematical, mysterious. And as you walk toward it, the desert crunching under your shoes, something quiet settles in your chest. This isn't just a pile of limestone. This is deliberate. The official story goes like this: around 2560 BCE, Pharaoh Khufu wanted a tomb. So 20 years and 2.3 million blocks later, the pyramid was finished. Each block on average weighs between 2 and 15 tons. At its peak, the structure rose 481 feet taller than any other man-made building until the 14th century. Pretty impressive for an ancient tomb, right? Except, here's where things get slippery. The Great Pyramid isn't just big, it's precise. Its base is a perfect square, just off true north, by less than 3/60ths of a degree. That's more accurate than most modern buildings. The sides are aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. The footprint of the pyramid is within a fraction of an inch of being level across 13 acres. And then there's the internal structure: angled shafts, passageways, resonance chambers, dead ends, and rooms with no clear purpose. You duck into the entrance passage. It's dark, narrow, cooler than you expect. The walls close around you like ancient lungs inhaling. There's no decoration, no hieroglyphs, no murals of jackal-headed gods, just clean, stark stone. You climb up through the grand gallery, its corbelled ceiling soaring above you in tight, angular grace. And that's when it hits you. This doesn't feel like a tomb. It feels like a machine. Historians still debate whether the pyramid was purely a burial chamber or whether it had some other purpose. Inside the so-called king's chamber, you find a granite box, often called a sarcophagus, but no body was ever found inside. No mummy, no inscriptions, just empty space and stone cut with eerie precision. Some researchers have suggested that the granite used here came from Aswan, over 500 miles away. And granite isn't soft. It's one of the hardest stones on Earth. Cutting it with copper tools, as we're told the ancient Egyptians did, should have taken decades. And yet the chamber is finished to a polish smoother than a modern kitchen countertop. You sit on the cold floor. The silence here is different, thicker, more intentional. Some say the pyramid amplifies certain frequencies, that its chambers are acoustically tuned. Sound carries strangely inside, bouncing in rhythmic patterns that settle not just in your ears, but in your bones. And there's math. So much math. The pyramid's height, when multiplied by 43,200, equals the polar radius of the Earth. Its base perimeter multiplied by the same number matches Earth's equatorial circumference. Coincidence? Maybe. But also, that's not a round number someone would just stumble upon. The proportions of the pyramid encode pi and the golden ratio, long before they were formally recognized in mathematics. It sits at the geographic center of Earth's landmass, as if someone knew where the continents would be. Its shadow, on specific days of the year, traces out curious shapes and alignments. Whoever built this wasn't just stacking rocks. They were encoding something. You wander outside again, blinking against the desert light. People are everywhere now. Tourists, snapping photos. Camels, groaning. Vendors, hawking trinkets. But none of that touches what you just felt inside. Because here's the thing. Most people forget. The Great Pyramid isn't just an ancient marvel. It's a lonely one. There's nothing else quite like it. Not in Egypt. Not anywhere. Sure, there are other pyramids, but they're smaller, less refined, even crumbling. They look like experiments that didn't quite work. This one feels final. Like it wasn't the first. Like it was the last. Some fringe theorists claim the pyramid wasn't built by the Egyptians at all, but by survivors of a lost civilization, perhaps one erased by flood or fire who passed down their knowledge in stone. Others suggest extraterrestrials helped. But maybe the wildest idea of all is the simplest one, that humans once were far more advanced than we remember, and then forgot. You think about how we live today with our phones and satellites and cloud storage, and then you wonder, if it all vanished tomorrow, what would be left in 5,000 years? Not much. Plastics crumble, metal rusts, but stone stays. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the pyramid was never meant to be a tomb. Maybe it's a message, not for the dead, but for us. A blueprint, a warning, a monument to knowledge, encoded in angles and weight and time. You walk back down the causeway, your shadow long across the sand. Behind you, the Great Pyramid sits silent, unbothered by the noise of the modern world. It doesn't need your theories. It doesn't need your approval. It just is. And as the sun sets over Giza, you can't help but feel a little different. Not just smaller, wiser, quieter. Like you've stood in the presence of something that doesn't care whether you understand it. Because understanding was never the point. Remember it. Wonder about it. Maybe that's enough. You find yourself walking downward now, into darkness, into depth, into one of the most perplexing chambers ever unearthed beneath the sands of Egypt. Above your head, the sun beats down on the ruins of Saqqara. But down here beneath layers of stone and shadow lies something stranger. This is the Serapeum. The hallway is narrow and dim-lit only by the imaginary flicker of torchlight that seems to echo through time. You walk in silence. The walls are smooth. The air smells of dry stone and ancient dust. And then suddenly, there they are, rows of massive black boxes resting silently in rock-cut vaults. Sarcophagi, that's what they're called. But they're unlike anything you've seen. Each one is carved from a single block of Aswan granite, the hardest stone the ancient Egyptians worked with. Some boxes weigh up to 70 tons, and the lids alone nearly 30 tons more. Their dimensions are so exact, so perfectly squared, that it's hard not to think of factory precision. These aren't rough-hewn burial containers. These are machines. You stand before one. It looms over you, a silent monolith of polished black stone gleaming faintly under your flashlight beam. You approach, run your palm along the inner surface of the open lid. It's perfectly smooth, not just smooth for ancient times. Smooth, like modern machining. Smooth, like optical-grade glass. And it was cut 300 years ago, according to mainstream timelines. How? Copper tools couldn't have done it. That's not speculation, that's metallurgy. There's no evidence of diamond-tipped drills, no metal blades that could have carved such exact angles and shapes. Yet the boxes exist, dozens of them, each more mind-bending than the last. You stare at the corners, perfectly square. Not a hint of chisel chatter, no visible errors. As if someone had a blueprint, or a code, or a technology we've lost. Maybe never had. Historians still debate the purpose of the Serapeum. Officially, it was a burial site for sacred bulls. Apis bulls, to be exact, revered in Egyptian religion as earthly manifestations of the god Ptah. Bulls were mummified, honored, and given elaborate tombs. But here's where the logic stumbles. If these boxes were meant to contain mummified bulls, why build them with such astronomical precision? Why use a material that would take years, decades, even to shape without proper tools? Why move them into tight subterranean vaults, accessible only through narrow passageways? It's like crafting a titanium time capsule to bury your house cat. You walk slowly past the next vault. Another box. Another unanswered question. Some of them are closed, their lids sealed tight. Others lie open hollow. The lids are often set beside the sarcophagus as if removed either recently or long ago. And yet, no remains have ever been conclusively found inside. No bull skeletons, no mummies, no inscriptions. Most of the boxes are completely unmarked. Not even a single hieroglyph. That's almost unthinkable in Egypt. Pharaohs carved their names into everything. Priests labeled everything. But here, there is only silence. You pause near one of the sealed boxes. Some say these are resonant chambers, that the size, the density, and the shape are designed to vibrate at specific frequencies. Sound researchers and fringe theorists alike believe that the boxes could serve acoustic or energetic purposes. You almost want to hum, to test the theory, to hear if the stone hums back. But tonight, silence feels wiser. You step back into the corridor and glance upward at the carved niches along the hallway. The passages are narrow tight. How did they get these boxes in here? No forklifts, no cranes, just rock and darkness. And somehow, these 100-ton containers were lowered, not rolled in, but set down with such care they haven't shifted in millennia. The logistics alone are baffling. Moving one of these boxes today would require heavy machinery cranes and weeks of planning. But ancient Egyptians are said to have done it with sleds and manpower across hundreds of miles, without breaking a single corner or cracking the lid. You pause again, squinting toward the end of the passage. More vaults, more questions. Who built the Serapeum? Mainstream archaeologists place it during the reign of Ramesses II around the 13th century BCE. But some structures seem older, much older. Some of the granite boxes may predate the 19th dynasty entirely. It's possible that later Egyptians simply repurposed the space like squatting in a house you don't understand, but dare not tear down. You sit against the cool wall, heart steady, mind wandering. You picture a forgotten engineer, dusty and sunbaked, lowering one of these impossible boxes into place, not sweating, not straining, but knowing, moving with purpose, with tools we no longer have, with knowledge we no longer teach, a machine, a resonance chamber, a time vault. Or maybe something stranger. There's a theory, of course, there is, that the boxes were never meant to hold bulls or bodies or anything of this world. That they were designed to contain energy, not in the sci-fi glowing orb sense, but as literal storage vessels for vibration frequency, even consciousness. It sounds wild until you're standing next to one. Then it just sounds plausible. The deeper you go into the Serapeum, the more you feel like you've crossed into a forgotten chapter of human history, one written in symbols we no longer read, in frequencies we no longer hear. These aren't coffins, they're statements, and we haven't figured out what they're trying to say. Eventually you turn to leave. The darkness lingers, but the path is clear. You've seen the Serapeum, or at least you've seen part of it, because truth be told, no one has seen the whole thing. Not yet. Now, you're high in the mountains again, but this time, not in the lush green Andes. You're above the altiplano of Bolivia, where the air is so thin, your breath comes in short, curious gasps. The landscape here is flat, wind-blasted, and strangely lunar. And in the middle of this barren, desolate plateau lies something that simply shouldn't exist. Welcome to Pumapunku. You arrive without ceremony, just dust and silence, and a few grazing llamas in the distance. From afar, it looks like a jumble of fallen stone blocks, almost as if a stone factory exploded and forgot to clean up. But as you step closer, the pieces begin to whisper their strange story. At first glance, Pumapunku appears ruined, but then your eyes adjust. The stones aren't randomly scattered. They're cut and not crudely. Some are shaped with such precision, it feels like someone brought a laser to a chisel fight. You kneel beside one of the iconic H-shaped blocks. The corners are perfectly square. The drill holes are evenly spaced, equidistant, like a machine calibration template. The lines are so straight, they could have been printed. And the symmetry, it's unnatural. You place your hand against the edge, sharp, smooth, flawless. Not the work of stone hammers, not the result of thousands of tiny blows. This was carved intelligently. Historians still debate whether these stones were shaped by hand or by technique long forgotten. Mainstream archaeology attributes the site to the Tiwanaku civilization flourishing around 500 to 1000 AD. But here's the catch: radiocarbon, dating from nearby organic material, suggests parts of the site may date back to 15,000 years ago. That would place Pumapunku before the advent of agriculture, before cities, before what we even call history. And the material, it's not some soft sandstone. Much of it is andesite and diorite, both extremely hard stones. In fact, diorite is so tough that modern stoneworkers often require diamond tools to shape it effectively. So how did ancient people with no metal tools, at least according to every academic textbook, shape it into this? You glance around at the hundreds of blocks. Many seem like they were once part of a vast and intricate puzzle. Some feature precise channels, 90-degree cuts, and interlocking joints. Others are hollowed, contoured, smoothed, as if melted and molded. But stone doesn't melt that way. Not without intense heat, or something else. There's a growing theory that Pumapunku was not just a ceremonial site, but part of a technological system. Perhaps it served a purpose we can no longer comprehend: an energy grid, a signal amplifier, or even a component of some lost machine. One of the most talked about features is the uncanny uniformity of the blocks. Multiple H-shaped stones are cut to the exact same measurements as if mass-produced in molds. Think about that. Mass production in prehistory. A level of standardization that would make a 20th century engineer raise an eyebrow. You wander past a broken wall and find yourself staring at a stone slab that once formed part of a gateway. The carving is deeply incised, perfectly symmetrical, featuring geometric motifs that seem to echo both art and instruction. There's nothing accidental here. This was communication, not decoration. Many researchers believe the entire site was laid out with astronomical alignment. Certain stones point to the solstices. Others align with star constellations now barely visible in the sky due to axial precession. You can almost imagine the builders looking up at a night sky far older than the one we see now, carving its map into the very bones of the earth. And then there's what's missing. At some point in history, something toppled Pumapunku. Not erosion, not decay, force. The stones were scattered, thrown as if by an immense earthquake or worse, an explosion. Some blocks weighing dozens of tons lie cracked, displaced, flung meters from their original positions. But there's no crater, no evidence of conquest, no battle. So what happened? Some believe a cataclysm struck the site, perhaps the same event that ended the Younger Dryas period, a sudden climate shift around 12,800 years ago. A comet impact, or solar flare, or planet-wide flood. If Pumapunku predates known civilization, perhaps it also marks the end of one we've forgotten. You sit on a low step, carved from a block, with impossibly sharp angles, and try to put yourself in the mind of its maker. Did they know we'd be confused? Did they expect us to return? Did they intend for these pieces to remain, to challenge, to baffle, to whisper through time? There are no mummies here, no tombs, no buried kings, just stone and silence and questions. Some claim Pumapunku was built by Viracocha, the Andean creator god, said to have arrived after a great flood. He taught humanity the arts of civilization, then left. His description: a tall man with pale skin and a beard, nothing like the local population. That story, oddly enough, mirrors similar myths from Mesopotamia, Egypt, even Polynesia. Is it coincidence or memory passed through myth? You stretch your legs and rise. A breeze cuts across the plateau, dry and cold, rustling the wiry grasses that have grown in the cracks. Your eyes scan the horizon where mountains loom like silent witnesses. And still, Pumapunku waits, unfinished. Or maybe damaged. Maybe what we're seeing is the skeleton of something far greater, once symmetrical, once functional, now shattered. A collapsed code from a forgotten engineer. One final detail haunts you as you prepare to leave. There are no inscriptions here, no explanation, no hieroglyphs, no pictographs, no markers of human ego. Just perfect cuts, almost as if the builders didn't need to explain. Because at the time, everyone already knew, and now, no one does. The air is heavy again, but this time not because of altitude. It's because you're underground. Really underground. You've left the wide skies of Bolivia behind, traded them for stone corridors and torchlit silence. You're in Turkey now, central Anatolia, and you've descended into a space that shouldn't exist. Welcome to Derinkuyu, the underground city. At first, you think it's just another cave. A little cool, a little damp. But then you go deeper. Another level. Then another. Before long, you're 30 feet below the surface, and the tunnel just keeps going. Twisting, narrowing, descending. Like an ant colony designed by ancient engineers with nerves of steel. It's dark, but the walls feel calm. These tunnels aren't random, they're organized. You pass ventilation shafts carved so precisely They still work today, providing fresh air to chambers hundreds of feet deep. There are stairs, kitchens, schools' wells, and even stables. You turn a corner and find what looks like a church. Arches and alcoves carved into volcanic rock like they've always been there. Peaceful, echoing. You keep walking. Eventually, you realize this wasn't just a shelter. It was a city. At its peak, Derinkuyu may have housed up to 20,000 people. Not for a weekend, not for a month, for years, generations. This wasn't a panic bunker. It was home. But why build a city underground? Historians still debate the purpose of Derinkuyu. Some suggest it was a defense against marauding invaders. Others think it was built to hide from religious persecution. But here's the problem. No one knows when it was built, or by whom. The earliest written mentions come from Byzantine times, but the construction techniques and layouts seem far older. Carving a hole in the earth is easy. Carving an 8-level metropolis, complete with massive rolling stone doors to seal off entrances, water collection systems, and an interlinked network of tunnels. That's something else entirely. You pause and study one of those stone doors. It's a circle, almost like a giant millstone, easily 10 feet across and weighing several tons. It sits in a recessed groove beside the tunnel, perfectly balanced. With one push, it rolls into place and seals the passage completely. Push again from inside, and it opens just as easily. These weren't afterthoughts. They were planned. The more you explore, the more it feels like Derinkuyu wasn't just practical, it was strategic. The narrow passages would have made it impossible for large groups to invade. Many corridors are just wide enough for one person at a time, meaning defenders could hold off entire armies from just one position. And yet, it's also strangely comfortable. There are spacious rooms with soot-blackened ceilings, evidence of ancient cooking fires. Wine cellars, storage areas for grain, communal spaces. You begin to feel less like an explorer and more like a visitor arriving late to dinner. You climb down another level. Now you're 5 stories below the Earth's surface, and still there's air. Still no mold. Still no collapse. The soft volcanic rock of the Cappadocia region made it easier to carve, yes, but it also made the structure vulnerable. And yet, these tunnels have lasted thousands of years without caving in. You run your hand along the wall. It's rough, but consistent. No tool marks remain. No chisels left behind. It's as if the entire city was hollowed out with patience and quiet skill, and then forgotten. Some researchers speculate Derinkuyu could be much older than we think, perhaps even dating back to the end of the last ice age around 10,000 years ago. If true, that would make it one of the oldest known urban settlements in the world, buried not built above ground. A civilization choosing invisibility over towers. And that raises a chilling question. What were they hiding from? You reach one of the deepest chambers, 7, maybe 8 levels down. The air is still breathable, but it's cooler now. Thinner. Your flashlight flickers across a narrow shaft, drilled from ceiling to floor. A well, possibly, but it runs through every level of the city. A continuous column of air, water, and access. Not hacked together, but engineered. There's a strange comfort in being this deep underground. The world above seems far away. Whatever chaos lived on the surface, the people down here survived it. Or tried to. There are no inscriptions in Derinkuyu. No statues. No murals. Just rooms. Spaces. Quiet functionality. It's as if whoever built this wanted efficiency, not glory. But there's one theory that lingers longer than the others. One that seems too strange not to consider. Some believe Derinkuyu was built to survive a catastrophe. Not war, not famine, but something global. A climate disaster, a solar storm, even an astronomical event. Evidence of sudden upheaval around 10,800 BCE, known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, suggests comet fragments or other cosmic debris may have triggered dramatic climate shifts across the planet. If that happened once, could it happen again? You walk slowly back up the tunnel, your footsteps echoing softly. Each chamber you pass feels like a sigh, a remnant, a whisper. These people didn't write down their fears. They carved them into stone. They dug down and waited. You reach the surface at last. The stars welcome you. The wind is cool again. And though you're no longer underground, a part of you still feels like you are, wrapped in that eerie stillness, that calculated preparation, that lingering question. If you had to vanish to survive a great forgetting, would you dig or would you run? Derinkuyu didn't run. It dug. You emerged from the depths of Derinkuyu with your ears still ringing from silence. But now you find yourself somewhere entirely different, far from subterranean tunnels, far from stone-cut tombs and weathered pyramids. This time, you're on the island of Malta. The Mediterranean breeze brushes against your face as you approach a low, unassuming entrance nestled into the rocky earth. Tourists often pass it by, unaware of what waits below. You duck through the opening and descend once more, not into darkness this time, but into vibration. Welcome to the Hal Saflieni Hypogam. It isn't like other ancient sites. There are no towering pillars or sweeping views. Instead, there are chambers stacked upon chambers, carved out of living rock, with such deliberate purpose that even your footsteps feel intrusive. This place was hidden for thousands of years, and when it was finally rediscovered in 1902, no one could believe what they found. 3 levels, dozens of rooms, sacred halls, burial chambers, and one very strange feature, the oracle room. You step into it slowly, guided by dim red lighting designed to protect the fragile surfaces. Your breath catches. The walls curve in concentric circles, embracing you in a space that feels more grown than carved. The ceiling arches smoothly above. And then you speak just a word, maybe your name, and the room speaks back, not in words, but in vibration. Your voice bounces circles and resonates. A single note hums longer than it should, deep and low, like a hidden chord under the earth. You feel it in your chest, not your ears, your bones. Researchers have tested it. The chamber is tuned to 111 hertz, a frequency that's been shown to shift brainwave patterns, inducing altered states of consciousness. Meditation, hypnosis, even trance. What does that mean? It means the builders of the hypogeum not only carved a multi-story underground sanctuary, but engineered it to manipulate the human mind. You sit in the oracle room, your hands resting on your knees. It's quiet except for that gentle hum, subtle but present. You imagine a priest standing here thousands of years ago, chanting into the void, the vibration echoing through the halls like a spirit. Or maybe it wasn't a priest. Maybe it was a woman, her voice activating the stone, drawing people into a communal trance, binding belief to structure. And again, the same question rises. How did they know how to do this? The hypogeum was built around 4000 BCE, give or take. That's older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, and yet the architectural and acoustic sophistication here feels modern. Intentionally carved resonance chambers, hidden nooks, echo paths, even ventilation shafts that maintain airflow throughout the site. Historians still debate its function. Burial site, yes. Over 7,000 human skeletons were found here, stacked and arranged in different chambers. But it's more than a tomb. It's an experience. Some say initiates were brought here to die metaphorically, entering darkness, hearing the droning hum of the oracle, and emerging transformed. A spiritual rebirth, not unlike later mystery cults of Greece and Egypt, except this came long before them. You move deeper into the complex. The walls are painted with ochre spirals, circles, and grids. The pigments, still vivid after millennia, were made from crushed rock and mixed with organic material. But what's stranger is the repetition of patterns, not just art, but perhaps signals, maps, sound diagrams. In one chamber, you spot a carving of a sleeping woman, curved, peaceful, round. She's known as the sleeping lady, often considered a fertility icon. But here, in the echoing dark, she seems like something else. A symbol, not just of life, but of liminality. The boundary between sleep and death, between one world and the next. You think back to the frequencies. 100 Lufthertz, that's not an accident. Today, sound engineers use that frequency to explore altered states. It stimulates the temporal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for memory, spirituality, and even perception of time. And here, on a tiny island 6,000 years ago, someone figured that out with only stone and patience. Unless they didn't figure it out. Unless they inherited it. That's a theory you hear whispered in corners of archaeological circles, that the people who built the hypogeum were not just farmers and artisans. They were receivers. People preserving knowledge passed down from a civilization now lost. Perhaps Atlantis. Perhaps something even older. Of course, mainstream scholars scoff. They cite natural acoustics, clever coincidence, cultural imagination. But here you are standing in a chamber that literally changes how your brain works, and the explanations suddenly feel inadequate. You pause and listen again. The hum isn't always present. It depends on how you stand, how you speak, how the air moves. It's subtle, like a code, written not in words, but in vibration. The walls carry sound the way copper carries electricity, channeling, looping, amplifying. This wasn't just a place of death. It was a device, a place to become something else. You walk back toward the exit, your steps reluctant. The passage narrows. Your breath returns to normal. The outside world calls, but your ears still ring faintly with that tone, that low, unshakable note still vibrating somewhere deep in your chest. You climb the final steps and emerge into sunlight, blinking like someone waking from a dream. And maybe you are. Maybe that's all the hypogeum ever was, a dream machine carved into stone, echoing with the frequencies of an ancient knowing. As you walk away, the birds chirp, the cars pass. The world goes on unaware, but you remember, your body remembers, because once you've stood in a room that speaks in sound and sleep, that vibrates your very bones, you don't forget. You just start listening differently. You wake up sweating, though the air is cool. Dust clings to your skin, though you haven't moved. It's not a nightmare exactly. It's the aftertaste of heat. Unnatural heat, as if something ancient just brushed past you. You blink and the stars above fade into a smoggy orange haze. You're no longer in quiet Malta. Now you're in the ruins of a city, scorched by time, and possibly by something else entirely. Welcome to Mohenjo-Daro. You stand atop a crumbling wall in what is now Pakistan, overlooking an orderly grid of streets and foundations. It's an eerie sort of order. Like the city was built with the logic of a modern planner, straight roads, efficient drainage systems, standardized bricks. But this city predates modern planning by millennia. Mohenjo-Daro thrived around 2500 BCE, part of the mysterious Indus Valley civilization. And yet, it had features that wouldn't appear in European cities until the 19th century. But you're not here for the plumbing. You're here because something strange happened here. Something that no textbook fully explains. As you wander the ruins, you reach an open plaza. Tourists once walked here pointing at signs in multiple languages. Now, it's just you. And silence. You feel the ground under your feet dry, cracked, and lifeless. There's a reason for that. Some researchers believe that at some point in the distant past, an intense heat seared this city in an instant. Not a fire, not a battle, but something else. When British archaeologists first began excavating Mohenjo-Daro in the 1920s, they found skeletal remains scattered across the city's streets. People lying face down, arms outstretched, some gripping hands. There were no signs of violence, no swords, no clubs, no arrows. Just people frozen in position as if something struck them down mid-step. And the bones, some showed levels of radioactivity that baffled researchers. It sounds like science fiction, ancient nuclear war, theories that belong in pulp novels and fringe documentaries. And yet, you can't ignore the details. A few blocks away, there's an area where the bricks themselves appear vitrified, melted, fused together under temperatures far beyond anything a normal fire could produce. That kind of heat would require something in the range of 1500 degrees Celsius or more. Nothing in the known technology of the time could explain it. Historians still debate the cause. Some suggest lightning strikes. Others blame kiln malfunctions. Still others claim meteor impacts. But there's no crater, no ash layer, no debris from above. Just a city that looks like it glitched out of the timeline. You duck into what remains of a residential building. The walls are knee-high now, the upper levels long since crumbled. Yet even here, you notice the odd uniformity. Bricks are nearly identical in size, laid in precise patterns. Some of the rooms still contain bathtubs, a public sanitation system far ahead of its time. And in the distance, the Great Bath looms. It's not a small pond or ceremonial puddle. It's a massive sunken rectangle lined with perfectly fitted bricks and sealed with natural tar. It once held water, drained and filled through hidden channels. What kind of culture builds such a structure unless water cleansing renewal means something more? You step into the bath. It's dry now. The silence is immense. You sit on the ledge, your hand brushing against the floor. Was this where rituals took place? Was this where the end began? Some ancient texts, notably from nearby Indian traditions, describe weapons of the gods, tools that burned like the sun, turned sand to glass, and left survivors haunted by sickness. The Mahabharata, written thousands of years after Mohenjo-Daro fell, tells of such weapons. Coincidence or memory preserved through myth? It's tempting to leap to conclusions, to cry nuclear and call it solved. But the truth is slipperier. Whatever happened here, it doesn't match any neat category. Not war, not natural disaster, not slow decay. It feels like something sudden, something powerful, something we're not equipped to understand. You leave the bath and walk along the silent avenues, your footsteps the only sound. The city stretches around you like a fossilized thought. Someone planned this. Someone dreamed it into being. And then something ended it, quickly, cleanly, without warning. Some researchers believe climate change played a role, that shifting river systems and prolonged drought drove the people away. But that doesn't explain the skeletons in the street. It doesn't explain the bricks turned to glass. It doesn't explain the way every explanation seems to almost work, but not quite. You pause and look up. The stars above this city haven't changed in 5,000 years. They saw what happened. They watched as the streets emptied, as the bath dried up, as the heat came or didn't. Maybe the stars remember, but they're not talking. And maybe Mohenjo-Daro wasn't the only one. Vitrified stone and strange skeletons have been found elsewhere: Scotland, India, the Middle East. What if these were not isolated anomalies, but echoes of a single event, a ripple in time, a flash of something we've chosen to forget? You sit down on the edge of a broken wall, the desert wind blowing soft around you. And for a moment, you picture it, not the destruction, but the life. Children running down straight, well-drained streets. Priests chanting beside the bath. Merchants haggling over dyed cloth and grain, then light, heat, silence. No bodies buried, no graves marked, just an after-image. You run your fingers over the vitrified stone again. It's cool now, safe, silent. But once it burned, you leave the seared city behind, stepping over bricks that once shimmered with unnatural heat, and travel south deep into Africa now. But not to the deserts or the pyramids. No, this time, you're in the highlands of Mpumalanga, South Africa, where the grass whispers and the wind carries stories older than stone. You walk until the land opens around you, and then you see it simple at first. A ring of stones, then another, and another. Circles dotting the landscape like scars etched into the hills by hands no one remembers. No walls, no cities, just ring after ring, quietly stubborn, whispering back at the wind. Welcome to Adam's calendar. They call it that because it aligns uncannily with celestial patterns. Standing stones mark solstices and equinoxes. Shadows fall at just the right angle. Some say it's the oldest man-made structure on Earth, possibly dating back 75,000 years. That's tens of thousands of years older than the pyramids, older than Göbekli Tepe, older than anything we're supposed to have built. You step between the stones and feel the tickle of something invisible. A pull, like static electricity, or maybe just your nerves responding to the weight of time. The arrangement is small, only a few meters wide, but its implications are vast. 4 standing stones form a circle, 2 of them specifically aligned with the rising and setting of the sun during solstices. Others appear to mark the movement of Orion's belt, a constellation that ancient cultures from Egypt to Central America linked with creation. And that's where it gets weird. Because when you map out the surrounding rings, over 10,000 circular stone ruins spread across southern Africa, you start to see more than just settlements. You see geometry, grids, patterns that span miles, like a giant circuit board carefully plotted onto the land itself. Some believe these ruins were cattle pens or housing structures left behind by early Iron Age farmers. But others point out that they lack entrances, that the soil inside the rings is magnetically different. that the whole region hums literally with inexplicable electromagnetic frequency. You sit on a flat stone and breathe slowly. The wind is soft but charged. Birds circle overhead. A hawk cries. It feels sacred here, not in a religious sense, in a forgotten one, like a place that was important long before humans started writing things down. Historians still debate the origin of Adam's calendar. There are no carvings, no tools, no bones, just stone. But the alignments are too exact. The odds of these placements being accidental are so low, it borders on mathematical impossibility. Whoever built this wasn't guessing. They were measuring. You reach out and touch one of the stones. It's worn flecked with lichen, but solid. Some say the stones are dolomite, and that they were dragged here, not just gathered from the landscape. If true, it means someone exerted enormous effort to align this site to the stars. And that's what links Adam's calendar to a broader mystery, the global obsession with Orion. You remember the Great Pyramid of Giza, aligned with Orion. Teotihuacan in Mexico, same. Even Angkor Wat in Cambodia. It's as if ancient civilizations separated by oceans, languages, and time kept pointing at the same stars. Why? Some say it's because Orion was viewed as a gateway, a place where gods descended or where souls ascended. In African tradition, the region around Adam's calendar is tied to creation stories, to the first people, to beings who came down from the heavens and taught humans how to live. One legend speaks of the Anunnaki gods from the sky, who arrived in flying machines and mined gold in the African earth. Sound familiar? Because that's the same name echoed in Sumerian texts, half a world away. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's something harder to brush off. When researchers used satellite imaging to map the stone circles, they discovered that the entire system appears wired together. Not physically, no copper or silicon, but energetically, like the land itself was tuned. Like these rings were nodes in a planetary circuit. Electromagnetic readings across this region spike at regular intervals. Some spots pulse with frequency, subtle, steady, like a heartbeat. And at the center of it all stands Adam's calendar. Quiet, still, waiting. You lie down in the grass, now staring up at the sky. Orion hovers above, just visible through the haze. You can't explain why, but it feels like the land is humming beneath you. Not loudly, just enough. Maybe these rings weren't homes. Maybe they weren't fences, or markers, or tombs. Maybe they were tools, or messages, or something we've forgotten how to read. The thought unsettles you, not because it's frightening, but because it feels right. That deep itch in your brain when something makes sense before you can articulate why. Like remembering a word you didn't know you knew. You sit back up and scan the land again. Ring after ring after ring. The scale is impossible to ignore. You're not looking at a single calendar. You're looking at a whole civilization. One wiped from memory, maybe not by disaster, but by time. And what if it wasn't erased? What if it was meant to fade? Leave behind only the barest imprint, a rhythm, a vibration, a handful of stones that still point to the same sky. It's hard to leave Adam's calendar. Not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it doesn't let you go easily. It raises too many questions. Who knew the stars like this? Who shaped the land? And why did they stop? As you walk away, the wind shifts. You glance back one last time. The stones are still there, and so is the sky. From the sun-drenched highlands of Africa, your path leads you east, deep into the heart of China, where myths are thick as mist, and the earth itself keeps its secrets carefully hidden. You're far from the open plains and whispering stones of Adam's calendar. Now you stand in front of a cavern so perfectly carved it might as well be a dream. Welcome to the Longyu Caves. You approach one cautiously expecting perhaps a natural formation, a crack in the stone, worn smooth by water and time. But as you pass the threshold, everything changes. The air cools, the walls straighten, the ceiling soars high above you, rippling with evenly spaced chisel marks as if someone meant for the stone to breathe. It's a man-made space, that much is obvious. But man-made, when by whom? For what? You take a few careful steps inside your footfalls, echoing softly against walls that seem to go on forever. And here's the thing. This is just one of them. There are at least 24 of these subterranean caverns, all carved into solid sandstone, hidden beneath the village of Xianbeikun in Zhejiang province. Together, they cover over 30,000 square meters. That's more than 7 acres of handcrafted underground architecture. And they weren't discovered until 1992. Let that sink in. These massive chambers were completely unknown to the modern world until villagers trying to deepen their pond started draining what they thought was a shallow pool and found steps, walls, rooms. It wasn't a pond, it was a ceiling. As more water was pumped out, more caves revealed themselves, some interconnected, some entirely sealed, yet all following the same precise design. Symmetrical layouts, uniform chisel patterns, straight corridors, elevated walkways. Giant stone pillars left intentionally in place to support ceilings that stretch up to 30 meters high. You place your hand on the wall. Every surface bears diagonal lines, all of them. Carved with something like a pick or a chisel, they're consistent in angle depth and direction. Not random, not haphazard. Like someone or some group meant to texture the cave like sanding wood or scoring clay. Some scholars believe it was for aesthetics. Others think it was functional, perhaps acoustics, perhaps symbolic. Either way, this wasn't amateur work. Historians still debate how such a massive project could have been carried out, let alone in complete silence. There are no historical records. None. No mention of the caves in ancient Chinese texts. No local folklore. No imperial edicts. No carvings or inscriptions inside. Just the caves themselves, stubborn and silent. It's estimated that over 1 million cubic meters of rock were removed to construct them. 1 million. And the sandstone isn't exactly soft. Removing that volume would have taken thousands of workers' years of effort and an extraordinary amount of planning. And yet, we found no tools, no rubble piles, no spoil heaps, nowhere for the discarded stone to go. It's like they carved out entire buildings and then swept the floor. You walk deeper into one of the chambers where the ceiling arches overhead like the belly of a whale. Sunlight barely reaches here. Your voice comes back to you in soft echoes. You test the sound, just a hum, then a word, then a whisper. And just like that, you hear it resonance. Some areas of the caves carry sound with uncanny clarity, like the room was tuned to some forgotten frequency. The diagonal marks on the walls. They might not be random decoration after all. Some theorists suggest the caves were designed as sonic chambers, possibly for ritual, possibly for communication, or maybe something even stranger. You turn a corner and find a carved platform, raised symmetrical, polished smooth. No inscriptions, no offerings, just a stone table waiting for a use no one remembers. It's hard not to imagine ceremonies held here, torches flickering, echoes bouncing from wall to wall, words vibrating with meaning we've long since forgotten. And then there's the shape. Each cave is roughly rectangular in plan, with intentionally sculpted columns and buttresses left intact to hold the weight of the mountain above. These were not random diggings. These were architectural spaces designed with structural integrity, spatial flow, and possibly spiritual significance. The uniformity suggests a master blueprint, a central mind or at least a central idea guiding every decision. And yet again, no names, no signatures, no marks of ownership. It's as if the builders didn't want to be known, or more hauntingly, as if they assumed everyone already knew who they were. Some researchers speculate that the caves were the work of the Yui people, an ancient tribe known to inhabit this region. Others believe they may date back far earlier, to a civilization we've yet to name, perhaps one washed away in flood or flame. There are whispers, of course. Whispers of advanced tools, of knowledge kept secret, of a culture that understood stone resonance, earth harmonics, and perhaps even magnetics in a way we no longer do. And if they were hiding, well, they chose their hiding place well. No one found them for 2,000 years. You pause before one of the central pillars, your palm flat against the stone. It's warm from the trapped heat of the earth. Smooth, not polished exactly, but worn with intent. You imagine the carvers, hundreds of them working by oil lamp, singing low songs, carving one deliberate strike after another. What was this for? A fortress. There are no defensive features. A tomb, no bones, no ashes, no markings. A temple. Maybe, but to whom the silence is absolute. The mystery intact. Some call Longyu China's underground Great Wall a feat so massive and unrecorded that it defies belief. But maybe that comparison misses the point. The Great Wall was built to keep things out. The Longyu Caves, they feel like they were meant to keep something in. Or maybe they were just meant to endure, to outlive questions, to hum long after their creators were dust. You step back toward the entrance. The light outside is bright, blinding after the soft amber darkness. As you climb the final steps out of the cave, it feels like surfacing from a dream. You blink. The trees sway. The birds call. But your ears still ring, not with noise, with memory. You're back in South America now, though. Calling this place America feels like cheating history. The jungles of Peru press in around you, like green waves, thick with heat and sound. Birds call from branches high above, and somewhere in the distance, water trickles over stone. But here beneath your feet, something older stirs. Welcome to Ollantaytambo. It's a name that rolls awkwardly off the tongue, but the stones here have no problem speaking. They don't shout, they whisper each block a murmur of intention and impossibility. This was once a fortress, a city, a temple, and perhaps much more. You begin at the bottom of the valley, where neatly paved roads weave through quiet courtyards. But your eyes are drawn upward to the steep terraced hills, where giant walls cling to impossible slopes like stone fingers grasping sky. You start to climb. The altitude is unforgiving. Your breath comes in shallow bursts. Your legs wobble. But every step brings you closer to one of the most confounding pieces of ancient engineering on the continent. At the top lies the Temple of the Sun, or at least what's left of it, 6 massive monoliths line the platform. Each of them weighs somewhere between 40 and 60 tons. Some researchers say more. And here's the twist: they didn't come from the hilltop. They didn't even come from the valley. They came from across the river. Across the Urubamba River, through a gorge, up a mountain, then back down, and then up again to this terrace, 9,000 feet above sea level. Let that sit with you. Imagine trying to move a stone that weighs more than a semi-truck, with no cranes, no steel cables, no dynamite, no wheel. Up mountains, across water, through jungle. And not just once, dozens of times. And yet here they are. Historians still debate how the Inca, or whoever came before them, accomplished this feat. The site is officially dated to the late Inca period, around the 15th century. But much like Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu, parts of Ollantaytambo don't match Inca craftsmanship. You run your fingers along one of the stones. The joins are tight. No mortar, no filler. The blocks are shaped to interlock in multiple dimensions, some, even with small protrusions that seem almost decorative, but are structurally purposeful. It's anti-seismic design before anyone understood seismic. But then you look behind the wall and you see unfinished stones, still halfway transported, lying like forgotten chess pieces across the path. Some were left where they fell. Others seem like they were abandoned mid-construction. Why was the site never completed, or was it interrupted? Maybe the builders, whoever they were, suddenly vanished. Or maybe they simply left the way a craftsman might abandon a studio when the purpose has been fulfilled. You reach the highest terrace and turn around. Below you, the entire sacred valley stretches wide. Lush, green, ancient. The river glimmers like a snake in the sun. And far across the landscape, you see something even stranger: the quarries. Jagged cliffs, barren and sunlit. That's where the stones came from. Some still rest halfway up the slope, as if they stopped in their tracks. One theory goes like this: the stones were moved using log rollers, ropes, and sheer manpower. But at this altitude, on these inclines, through those ravines, even modern engineers raise their eyebrows. Another theory, more fringe, more whispered, is that the builders knew something about sound. That certain frequencies could help reduce the friction between surfaces. That vibration might somehow aid in moving heavy stone. And then there's the oldest whisper of all. The stones were never moved. They were molded in place, as if the rock had been softened, not carved, poured, not chiseled. It's outrageous. But so is the wall in front of you. You descend now past niches shaped like trapezoids, Inca trademarks, and through corridors lined with symmetrical recesses. Some say they were for storage. Others believe they held golden idols or sacred relics. And then you find something odd: stone knobs protruding from several of the blocks. They're not functional in the modern sense. They don't hold ropes. They don't latch anything. But they repeat almost like a signature. You've seen these before at Sacsayhuaman, at Machu Picchu, at Pumapunku. Always in the most precisely engineered walls. Always without explanation. Were they part of the moving process? Some tool grip for lifting? Or were they left behind on purpose, a message in relief? You walk farther into the temple area where the views widen and the stones feel more polished, more ceremonial. This wasn't just a defensive site. It was sacred. Some believe Ollantaytambo aligns with the stars, particularly the constellation of the Pleiades, which held special significance for the Inca and pre-Inca peoples. Others see the terraces not just as agriculture, but as energy steps, cascading flows of water and earth harmonized with cosmic rhythms. And then just to the side, you see something else, the face. Carved, or perhaps revealed on the cliff across the valley, is a profile. A massive human face. Long nose. Prominent forehead. A crown of natural rock that some claim resembles a headdress. Locals call it Tunupa, a legendary god figure of light and wisdom. You don't know if it's natural. You don't know if it's deliberate, but it watches the valley. Always. And that's the strange thing about Ollantaytambo. It feels watched. Not in a haunted way, in a remembered way. Like the stones haven't forgotten who placed them here. Historians still debate the timeline. The narrative says Pachacuti, the great Inca emperor, ordered the construction. But what if he only inherited it? What if Ollantaytambo, like so many other sites, was already ancient when the Inca rose to power? What if the Inca built with reverence, not ambition? As the sun dips lower, the stones turn golden. Shadows stretch long across the terraces. The walls glow as if lit from within. And for a moment, just a moment, you understand. This wasn't just a city. It was a bridge between earth and sky, between stone and spirit, between memory and forgetting. You turn to leave, walking slowly down the zigzagging path. But as you do, one last question clings to your mind. Who were they building for? Themselves or us? The jungle thickens around you once more, but this time you're not in Peru or the Andes. Now you're in the depths of Central America, where vines drape over stone like curtains, where every breath carries the scent of moss and thyme. The canopy overhead is so dense it turns day into dusk. You hear birds calling insects, humming, and somewhere nearby, the hush of something waiting. You're in the ancient city of Copan. Located in modern-day Honduras, Copan was one of the most advanced cities of the Maya civilization. But this isn't the Mexico of Chichen Itza or Tikal's sweeping towers. This city is quieter, stranger, and sharper, because the real mystery here isn't just in the buildings, it's carved in code. You walk along the central plaza, marveling at the classic pyramids and terraced platforms. But your eyes keep drifting toward a rising staircase covered in something other Maya temples rarely display so boldly: glyphs. This is the hieroglyphic stairway, 63 steps covered in over 2,000 individual glyphs, telling a story no one has fully deciphered. The most complex writing system in the entire Mayan world. Like a vertical scroll, unreadable unless you know how to tilt your mind sideways. Each glyph is a tiny work of art. Symbols within symbols. Language woven with metaphor, astronomy, bloodlines, gods and numbers. It is the Rosetta Stone of the Maya, but incomplete, damaged, misplaced. Some of the blocks were found in disarray, toppled by time or conquest, and reassembled, but not perfectly. So now the story stutters and skips like a scratched record. We can guess what it once said, but the full truth remains elusive. You sit on the steps and place your hand beside one of the glyphs. A jaguar face grins back at you, its teeth sharp, even after 1,300 years. This place wasn't just a city, it was a repository of memory. The Maya weren't just architects, they were librarians of time. But here's where things get strange. Copan isn't just famous for its glyphs. It's known for its sudden silence, Around 800 AD, the city, thriving, advanced, and at its cultural peak, vanished. Not in flame, not in battle. It simply stopped. The kings stopped being carved into stelae. The temples ceased expansion. The calendar entries ended. What happened? Historians still debate the collapse. Some say environmental degradation. Others suggest drought, political unrest, disease. But it doesn't quite add up. Copan was advanced in agricultural terracing capable of supporting large populations. It was home to master mathematicians, astronomers, and artists. A civilization like this doesn't just walk away, unless it was told to, or forced to. You wander toward the ball court, where ancient athletes once played a sacred game part, sport part, ritual part, cosmological drama. The ball wasn't just a ball. It was a celestial body, bouncing between worlds, reenacting creation myths with every bounce. Winners were celebrated. Losers, well, that's where the stories diverge. Some say the losers were sacrificed. Others argue it was the victors. Because sacrifice wasn't punishment to the Maya, it was honor. A reunion with the gods, a return to the stars. And that's the deeper truth of Copan. It was always more than stone. It was story. Every plaza, every altar, every pyramid is positioned not just for function, but for meaning. The temples align with stars, planets, solstices. The very layout of the city reflects the Maya view of the cosmos, a tri-level universe of sky-earth, and the watery underworld below. You climb to the top of Temple 26, where a stela stands tall, weathered by centuries of rain and rebellion. The face carved into its front stares calmly into time. A king, a priest, a god, maybe all three. In Maya culture, the line between mortal and divine was blurred. Kings weren't just leaders, they were mediums, channels between worlds, and that may be the most unnerving idea of all. Because what if the disappearance of Copan wasn't failure, but fulfillment? What if the Maya here weren't wiped out, but ascended in some symbolic, ritualized exit? The glyphs hint at something grand. A cycle, a turning of the sky, the end of an age, the opening of a door. One glyph, partially translated, speaks of a return of the gods. Another, of a sky serpent descending. These are mythic metaphors, sure. But what if they were also literal? What if Copan wasn't just abandoned, but sealed closed, like a book whose story reached its conclusion? You descend the temple, slowly passing by broken monuments and toppled altars. The jungle here reclaims everything. Vines reach out like fingers. Roots lift stones. Time presses in from all sides, and yet, the silence feels intentional, like a performance that ended exactly when it was supposed to. Copan's people didn't forget their place in the universe. They wrote it, carved it, aligned it with the stars. They didn't need immortality. They became myth. You pause before one last glyph, nearly erased by erosion. It shows a face, half human, half beast, surrounded by stars. Below it, a line of dots forming a long count calendar entry. You don't understand the numbers, but the feeling, you feel it deep in your ribs. This place was never meant to last forever. It was meant to remind of time, of endings, of how even the most advanced civilizations eventually choose silence. You leave the jungle with its whispering glyphs and venture far to the north, now where the air sharpens and the trees grow tall, dense, and pine-scented. Welcome to the forests of the Pacific Northwest, not the home of temples or pyramids, At least not the kind you'd expect. But here, under the shadow of snow-capped mountains and the hush of cedar groves, lies a mystery just as deep. Welcome to the legend of Cahokia. It's a name few recognize, and even fewer pronounce correctly. But long before New York lit up, before Washington, D.C. was sketched on paper, Cahokia was the greatest city in what is now the United States. Built near the Mississippi River, just east of modern-day St. Louis, it once housed more people than 12th century London. You approach from the grasslands. The wind flattens the prairie in waves, and then rising from the flatness, like a quiet mountain, appears Monk's Mound. It's the largest earthen mound in the Americas, a massive structure 100 feet high composed of more than 22 million cubic feet of earth. No cranes, no carts, no animals to help, just baskets of dirt carried one at a time by human hands, piled up with such precision that the mound still stands hundreds of years later. You climb slowly foot by foot, feeling the weight of effort behind every layer. When you reach the top, the wind cuts clean across the open platform. This wasn't just a high point. It was a place of power, a viewpoint, a throne, maybe even a stage for rituals the Mississippi winds still remember. And yet, few know it exists. Cahokia reached its peak around 1050 to 1200 AD, boasting a population of 20,000 to 40,000 people. That's comparable to medieval Paris. But there are no stone towers here, no castles, no written records, just earth-shaped with uncanny order. From the summit, you look out and begin to see the full plan, mound after mound, arranged in mathematical precision, forming plazas and alignments that scholars still argue over. To the northwest, a circle of wooden posts once stood Woodhenge, as it's now called, an enormous solar calendar used to track solstices and equinoxes. The posts, now reconstructed, form a perfect circle. Stand at the center on the right day, and the sun rises directly between two of the uprights. Like clockwork, like knowing. But how did a so-called primitive society know such things? They had no writing system, no metal tools, no beasts of burden. And yet they planned a city so well that its drainage still works. They tracked the stars, built elevated highways between plazas, and when they needed more space, they didn't knock down, they built up. Historians still debate what caused Cahokia's sudden rise. Some believe it was a religious awakening. Others point to a supernova visible in the sky around 1054 AD, perhaps interpreted as a divine signal. Whatever the cause, the city appeared rapidly and vanished just as fast, because by 1350, Cahokia was empty. No one really knows why. There's no evidence of conquest, no signs of plague or mass famine. One day, it was the most advanced urban center in North America, and then it just faded like mist off the river. You descend Monk's Mound, passing by the remains of what would have been elite homes, now just outlines in the soil. You walk toward Mound 72, smaller but darker in its history. It was here archaeologists discovered a burial unlike any other. A man, likely a ruler, was buried atop a platform of shell beads arranged in the shape of a falcon. Alongside him, more than 250 human sacrifices, young women, mostly their lives cut short in symmetrical rows. It wasn't random. It was ceremony. It was power. Was Cahokia a theocracy? A city ruled by divine right? A spiritual capital with rituals we've lost all context for? Or was it something stranger? Some theorists whisper that Cahokia had help perhaps from outside cultures, perhaps from knowledge long forgotten. The mound alignment suggests astronomical understanding far more complex than oral societies are supposed to possess. The geometry is clean, the logistics staggering, and there's one more thing. The soil used to build Monk's Mound wasn't just dug from the surrounding fields. It came from miles away, different layers of clay sand and silt, carefully selected and arranged to stabilize the massive structure. That's not guesswork. That's geotechnical engineering. You walk along the old causeways, your feet sinking slightly into the grass-covered earth. Around you, the landscape is still. No walls, no spires. Just the suggestion of something grand now folded back into the land. And yet Cahokia matters because it reframes everything. It challenges the myth that North America had no cities before European arrival, that its people were scattered nomadic without complexity. Cahokia was proof that human ingenuity blooms wherever humans are riverside, jungle, mountain, prairie, with dirt, with stars, with memory. You pause one last time before leaving the site. A bird, maybe a red-tailed hawk, circles overhead just above Monk's Mound. The wind shifts. The silence stretches. Cahokia didn't leave behind books or marble. It left shapes, lines, and a question no one can quite answer. Why build something so massive, only to disappear? From the gentle whispering grasses of Cahokia, you now travel to a place where the land itself seems like it has something to say, where wind cuts sharp through rocky ridges and the sun hangs low over valleys filled with secrets. You're deep in Bashkiria, in the southern Ural Mountains of Russia, standing before a wall that shouldn't be there. A wall too big, too precise, too old. Welcome to the mystery of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths. No signposts mark this place. No tourist buses. No plaques with tidy explanations. Just granite blocks stacked and tumbled like a forgotten game of stone Tetris. Some of the blocks stretch over 40 feet long. They stand taller than two-story houses. And they weigh well. That's where the whispers begin. Estimates range from 1,000 tons to 4,000 tons per block. That's not a typo. You stare at them, your breath catching a little in the cold mountain air. These stones aren't just lying around. They're shaped with right angles, flat faces, and 90-degree corners. Some are stacked in rows. Others lean against each other, like they once formed a structure. A massive one now shattered by time or catastrophe. Mainstream geologists argue that this is a natural formation. That granite, under certain conditions, fractures in neat planes forming what looks like blocks. And sure, it's true, some rock behaves that way. But you step closer, you touch the surface, and you realize something feels different. These aren't just cracked rocks. Some appear to be fitted, as if part of a structure. You notice one with a groove running its length, too consistent to be erosion, too clean to be accidental. Others bear faint striations, almost like tool marks. And again, the scale. These blocks dwarf the trilithons of Baalbek. They dwarf the stones of the Great Pyramid. They are quite simply the largest stone blocks you've ever seen. So, who put them here? Historians don't have an answer. Most won't even touch the question. The site remains largely unexplored, undocumented by major institutions. There's no definitive excavation, no timeline, no name. It's not even officially considered archaeological. It's called a geological oddity. But standing here surrounded by silence, staring at these stone giants, you feel something more than odd. You feel forgotten technology or forgotten purpose. Maybe both. You walk along the base of the wall, your boots crunching over frost-bitten moss. Some of the blocks seem to lean outward slightly, like the slope has shifted over time. Others have fallen split by frost or pressure, leaving behind jagged wounds in otherwise polished faces. You wonder if this was a building or a platform. What kind of people could have constructed it? Because 4,000 tons isn't just heavy. It's impossible. Modern cranes, the biggest ones, can maybe lift 200 tons on a flat surface with preparation. And here, you're on a mountain slope. No level ground. No access roads. Just windstone and trees. To place even one block here would require technology or knowledge we no longer possess, and maybe never did. Some fringe theorists argue that the megaliths are remnants of a pre-flood civilization, one so old that it predates recorded history by tens of thousands of years. A society wiped away, leaving behind only the most stubborn artifacts. Stone so large, so heavy, it couldn't be stolen, or burned, or forgotten. You step back and look up. One block long and rectangular rests across the tops of two others like a lintel. It's cracked now, a scar running through its center. But once, maybe it formed a doorway, or a window, or a frame for something long gone. Historians still debate the age of human settlement in this region. The Ural Mountains have yielded Paleolithic tools, some dating back 30,000 years. But they've also revealed anomalous artifacts, microscopic spirals made of tungsten and molybdenum, discovered in streambeds nearby. Items that look like modern components. Items whose function is completely unknown. Coincidence? Maybe. But Gornaya Shoria doesn't feel accidental. It feels buried, not by soil, but by time. You walk higher up the ridge, your breath fogging in front of you. And then you see it a boulder, carved not smooth, but scalloped, as if something once scraped along its side with enormous precision. A natural force, or something mechanical. There's no way to prove it, but there's also no way to unsee it. You sit down on one of the smaller stones, smaller in this case, meaning it weighs roughly as much as a train engine, and try to imagine a world where these blocks were new, where people moved among them, where tools could lift shape and polish stone like butter. Maybe it was a temple. Maybe it was industrial. Maybe it was a signal, something meant to be seen from above. That's another theory. From high above, some believe the layout of the Gornaya Shoria formations resembles ancient maps, grids lines, geometric figures too large to recognize from ground level. Like Nazca, but in stone. What would you say to the sky if the sky was listening? As night falls, the temperature drops fast. The megaliths change color in the twilight, from granite gray to deep blue to black. They seem even larger now, more permanent. You can almost imagine them shifting, groaning, turning slightly in their sleep. But they don't move. They've stayed here for thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years, waiting, not for answers, just for someone to look again. You rise, rubbing your hands together, breath steaming. One last glance at the towering blocks. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, it was built to last. From the wind-bitten slopes of Russia, your journey now takes you across the sea to a land steeped in myth, surrounded by water and crowned by cliffs that fall into eternity. You're in Ireland now, where the air is damp and charged with legend, and everything seems older than it should be. You're standing before Newgrange. It doesn't look like much from a distance, just a grassy mound round, and smooth like a hill that got dressed in Sunday best. But step closer, and the details start to whisper. There's a white quartz facade that gleams unnaturally bright against the muted green of the Irish countryside. And at the base, stones carved with spirals, waves, and odd repeating patterns like fingerprints from a forgotten god. You follow the narrow passage into the mound, crouching slightly as the walls narrow and twist. The stone beneath your hands is cold and rough. You pass carved slabs, some etched with concentric circles, others with triangles, lozenges, or grids. The deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes. Then you arrive in the central chamber. No windows, no torches. Just you and the weight of 30 centuries of silence. The chamber has a corbelled roof built without mortar stones laid inward one after another, forming a perfect dome that hasn't leaked a drop of rain in over 5,000 years. Think about that. Before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before most civilizations had even formed words, this place was finished. And then the strangest part, the light box. A narrow opening above the entrance tunnel, perfectly aligned with the winter solstice sunrise. On the shortest day of the year, for just 17 minutes, the rising sun shines directly through that slit and illuminates the chamber. Not partially, not vaguely. A beam of golden light penetrates the darkness and touches the back wall with pinpoint precision. Who does that? Who spends years, decades hauling stones, carving tunnels, aligning passages, just to catch the first ray of winter sun? Historians still debate the purpose of Newgrange. Was it a tomb? A temple? A calendar? Maybe all three. Human remains have been found here, though only in fragments cremated arranged with care, but not as mass burial. This wasn't about death. It was about transition. You sit in the chamber, imagining what it must have felt like on that solstice morning. The crowd gathered outside, the cold biting their fingers. The priest, if you can call them that, standing inside waiting. Then, as the sky turns pink, the beam strikes, and the chamber lights like a divine lantern. This was ceremony. This was connection between earth and sky, between life and death, between human and cosmos. And what's most fascinating, no one knows who built it. The people who constructed Newgrange left no written language, no blueprint, no signature. We call them the Neolithic people, which is really just a placeholder for we have no idea. They knew astronomy, geometry, engineering. They transported stones from miles away, some from as far as the Wicklow Mountains, others across rivers and bogs through rain and snow and who knows what. And then they buried it. That's right. Sometime after it was completed, Newgrange was covered intentionally. For centuries, it looked like nothing more than a hill. Locals called it Cian Brú, the fairy mound of the Brú. They believed it was the home of the Tuatha De Danann, a mythical race of godlike beings who ruled Ireland before the arrival of humans. And maybe they were right. Not literally, perhaps. But myth has a funny way of preserving memory. The fairy people were described as luminous, ageless, powerful, living underground in places aligned with stars. Sound familiar? You exit the chamber and step back into the gray Irish light. The hill around you rolls with centuries of moss and mist. Sheep graze nearby, indifferent to the magic beneath their hooves. There's another mound nearby Noath, and another Douth. Together, they form a triad of aligned passage tombs, all constructed during the same era. Each one has its own solar alignments, stone carvings, chambers, and mysteries. Some believe the entire Brú na Boinne complex was a single astronomical device calibrated to track solar and lunar cycles with more precision than most modern rural observatories. But why? Why go to all this effort? Why track the sun and moon so meticulously? Why build stone chambers to catch moments of light? Maybe it was religion. Maybe it was agriculture. Or maybe it was a message, a way of saying, we were here. We understood. And now, you must remember. Because even if the language is lost, the light still speaks. And what it says every year, like clockwork, is, we saw you coming. Newgrange isn't just old. It's timeless, and it doesn't ask for belief. It just shines once a year for 17 perfect minutes. Long enough for a heartbeat. Long enough for a prayer. Then it goes dark again. Waiting. You travel north again. Past the British Isles over cold seas into a realm of snow and rock, and silence so thick you feel it in your chest. You're not visiting a temple or city this time. You're here for a road, or what's left of it. Beneath Iceland's glaciers, and beneath the silence of time, lies a structure few outside of certain academic circles even know exists. Welcome to the Djúpalón Sandur basalt columns, and the strange debate surrounding Iceland's forgotten ancient pathways. You arrive on the black sand beach of Djúpalón Sandur, windswept and alien. The ocean crashes nearby, relentless and metallic. The ground crunches beneath your boots. Smooth black pebbles, hardened lava, volcanic glass. And then there they are. Hexagonal basalt columns arranged so perfectly they look carved. As if some ancient engineer decided the cliff face needed upgrading. The angles are precise, the lines strangely familiar. You walk toward them, drawn to their texture, their unnatural geometry. They look like stacked pencils, or the teeth of a gear built for the earth itself. Geologists will tell you this is all natural, that when lava cools slowly and evenly, it fractures into these shapes. And that's mostly true. But what they won't quite explain, what they tiptoe around, is the patterns. Because in certain places along Iceland's remote coastlines, these columns aren't just scattered, they're arranged. Set in deliberate-looking rows, some with flat tops like paving stones. In a few areas now buried beneath layers of glacial runoff, some say they resemble a road, not a modern one. Something far older, something no one remembers building. You follow a trail that disappears into moss and mist. The stones under your feet begin to change smoother, flatter, unnaturally level for such a chaotic landscape. Could it really be a road? Or are you just walking on coincidence? Historians still debate whether ancient people could have existed in Iceland before the Vikings arrived around 870 AD. The official story is clean. The Norse came settled and found a land untouched by humans. But there have always been rumors about monks, about sailors, even about pre-flood survivors, that something or someone was here first. And if someone was, they would have needed paths. One of the strangest features nearby is the Kirkjugolf, or church floor, in the south of Iceland. There are basalt tiles spread out across a field in neat, flat hexagons. Tourists step across them every year, marveling at how they resemble tiled flooring. Again, geology says this is natural. But even natural formations can be used, repurposed by clever hands. What if the basalt wasn't carved but selected? You find a sunken groove between columns, like a cart track worn into the stone. Maybe it's erosion. Maybe it's something else. Iceland's terrain is rough, hostile. If you were to build a road here thousands of years ago, this is how you'd do it. Use what nature gives and sharpen the rest. And there's more. Local legends speak of the hidden people, the Huldefolk, elusive beings who live in stones, who shape the land and walk among us unseen. These stories persist not just in Iceland, but in almost every highland culture from Ireland to the Arctic. The idea of ancient beings tied to the earth older than memory working in stone. Were they metaphors or memory, dressed up as myth? You sit near the edge of a cliff, the Atlantic wind howling around you. Somewhere below, the black waves crash into the basalt wall, sending up salt spray like steam. You close your eyes, and for a moment you hear it not the sea, but the rhythm, the pulsing of earth and fire and water. Iceland is new, geologically speaking. But what if something old moved here when the rest of the world collapsed? After all, there are no temples here, no pyramids, no inscriptions, just forms, structures that feel built but unclaimed. Could this be what survival looks like? Not glory, not monuments, but infrastructure. Paths laid quietly across lava flows, channels worn into cooled magma, stone columns placed or left where they were most useful. You walk a little farther and find a half-buried ring of stone, not a perfect circle, not a full enclosure, but just enough to make you wonder. Was it a foundation, a shelter, a marker, or maybe just the last stone in a path that once led somewhere important? Geologists still say it's all coincidence, but you've seen too much to believe in that anymore. These columns speak, just like the ones at Giant's Causeway in Ireland, just like the tessellated pavements in Tasmania. They speak in angles, in order, in the language of purpose. You trace your finger along one edge perfectly straight for several feet. You think about what this would have looked like before erosion, before the volcanoes, before the forgetting. Some researchers point to ancient cart ruts found on other islands like Malta or Sardinia, deeply carved grooves in stone, often leading into the sea. Were they roads, runways, ritual paths? No one knows, but the pattern repeats. Wherever these impossible paths appear, they seem to mark places where ancient knowledge bloomed then vanished. Always in stone, always just beyond what we can explain. And maybe that's the point. Maybe these weren't roads for feet or wheels. Maybe they were alignments, ways to chart energy, or star maps, or circuits. The wind picks up now, colder, heavier with salt. You look back along the basalt. The mist thickens. The stones blur. What felt clear becomes uncertain again. But one thing lingers. You've walked a road no one remembers, and it remembered you. From Iceland's basalt bones and haunted pathways, you sail far south, now past the equator, past the deserts, to a land where mountains slice the sky, and clouds seem stitched to the stone. You're in Ethiopia, high on a plateau, in the Horn of Africa, staring down into something that should be impossible. A church, not built above ground, but carved into it. Welcome to Lalibela. At first, you don't even see it. The landscape is rough, worn by centuries of wind and devotion. Then you realize you're not standing in front of a structure, you're standing above one. A square courtyard is carved deep into the earth, and in its center stands the iconic church of St. George, shaped like a perfect cross. It's not assembled. It's not made of bricks or mortar. It's chiseled from a single block of volcanic tuff downward with surgical precision. No cranes, no scaffolding. Just one stone removed grain by grain until what remained was architecture. You walk down a narrow trench into the trench-like passage that leads to the entrance. The walls around you rise like cliffs. Your footsteps echo in the silence. It feels less like entering a building and more like descending into thought, into purpose. Inside the ceiling arches with natural grace. The walls are smooth even, Windows are cut in geometric shapes. Crosses, circles, eight-pointed stars. Light slips through these openings and lays soft patterns on the floor. And this is just one church. There are 11 of them, all carved, not built. All hidden in the earth, yet connected by narrow corridors, trenches and tunnels, some above ground, some below. These aren't tombs. They're not caves. They're fully functional houses of worship, each designed with aesthetic mastery and spiritual geometry. So how were they made? Legend says they were created in the 12th or 13th century under the reign of King Lalibela, who sought to make a New Jerusalem after Muslim conquests blocked pilgrimages to the Holy Land. The story goes that Lalibela had a vision from God and that angels helped him carve the churches. And honestly, you kind of get it, because to look at these churches is to feel disbelief. Carving downward is exponentially harder than building up. You can't make mistakes. There's no patching, no corrections. You either shape the stone right the first time, or you start over somewhere else. And the layout, the churches form two main clusters mirroring Jerusalem, one representing earthly Jerusalem, the other heavenly Jerusalem. The symbolic architecture is woven into the geography like embroidery in stone. Historians still debate whether it's possible that all 11 were carved in a single king's lifetime. Some scholars suggest that the site may be much older, that Lalibela merely reclaimed and renamed it, adding inscriptions and reconsecrating ancient structures already there. That's where the whispers start, because beneath the churches lie older chambers, sealed tunnels, worn stairways, and blocked doorways. No one quite knows where all the passages go. Some have yet to be mapped. Others are said to lead deeper underground to caverns and chambers that predate Christianity altogether. There are no definitive records of how long the churches took to complete. No blueprints, no surviving tools, just stone shaped with impossible skill. Some researchers suggest ancient Egyptians may have influenced the style. Others hint at pre-Christian religious sites absorbed and reimagined by later generations. But whoever started it, whether in 1200 or long before, knew something. You exit the Church of St. George and make your way through a sunken path to Biere Medane Alem House of the Savior of the World. It's the largest of the rock churches, with massive stone pillars rising from the earth like a colonnade of giants. It's hard not to gasp. At 11 meters tall and over 30 meters long, it rivals Greek temples in scale. But remember, it wasn't built. It was excavated. The pillars aren't placed. They're revealed, and it gets stranger. Acoustic testing in some churches reveals harmonic resonance similar to the oracle room in Malta. The chambers respond to sound hum chant or prayer and amplify it in strange and beautiful ways. Was this intentional or simply a divine coincidence? You sit in one of the cool alcoves, your back against volcanic stone, and try to imagine what it must have taken. Years of labor, generations of masons, or something else. Some legends say the churches were built in a matter of days, that the angels worked at night while men worked by day. That divine energy flowed through the rock, guiding every strike. It's easy to dismiss until you see the straight lines, the perfect arches, the symmetry that modern builders struggle to match even with power tools and computer models. And then you consider the altitude 8,000 feet above sea level, the difficulty of transporting labor tools and food, and you realize this wasn't just construction. It was devotion, a sacrifice not of blood, but of effort. And still, the question hums. Was King Lalibela building something new, or uncovering something already ancient? You descend one final passage, narrow and dim, said to symbolize the descent into hell before rising again toward light. It leads to Beta Georgis, the iconic cross-shaped church, perhaps the most famous of the set. You stand before it this time from the outside looking down into the trench. The geometry is almost too perfect, not just mathematically, but emotionally. This place is not just seen, it's felt, and that might be the point. Lalibela isn't about conquest or display. It doesn't sit atop hills like a crown. It's hidden, carved downward, inward, a meditation in stone. And when you leave, climbing the steps back to the surface, sunlight hits your face in a different way. The world feels wider, heavier, more sacred, because for all the talk of gods and kings and ancient architects, someone stood here with a hammer and a vision and carved their belief straight into the earth. And that belief, it hasn't cracked in 1,000 years. From the mountains of Ethiopia, you journey now across oceans westward, past jungles and deserts, until the world turns to ocean spray and volcanic cliffs. You're in the middle of the South Pacific, now standing on an island so small you could almost miss it. And yet, it holds one of the greatest riddles of the ancient world. Welcome to Easter Island, or as the locals call it, Rapa Nui. The wind is salt-heavy here, and it whispers through tall grass that hides secrets older than any story you were told in school. You walk slowly along the island's jagged coastline, and there, rising like stone memories, are the faces. The Moai, over 900 of them. Colossal stone heads with elongated ears, deep-set eyes, and brows furrowed like they've been watching humanity for far too long. Some are still upright, some half-buried, some toppled. But all share the same haunting presence, silent sentinels, gazing inward, not out to sea, but toward the heart of the island. That alone is unusual. Why would guardians face away from the ocean? Historians still debate it. Some say they're protecting the villages behind them. Others believe they're channeling spiritual energy inward toward the land, the people, the dead. And speaking of the dead, these statues were once placed atop stone platforms known as ahu, many of which are tombs. The Moai were more than sculptures. They were ancestors carved to honor the great chiefs and sages who had passed on. But how they were carved, moved, and erected remains one of archaeology's most persistent mysteries. Each Moai weighs anywhere from 10 to 80 tons, with the largest named El Gigante weighing over 160 tons. They were carved from volcanic tuff in a quarry on the slopes of Rano Raraku, where dozens of half-finished statues still lie, frozen mid-birth, as if their makers vanished mid-chisel. You walk up to one of the fallen giants, running your fingers across the weathered stone. The grooves are clear. Tools, likely stone tools, were used. But how did these ancient islanders, with no metal, no wheels, and no large animals for labor, move these titans miles across uneven terrain? Some researchers suggest they used log rollers or sleds. Others say they dragged them with ropes. But the forest that could have provided those logs has long vanished. Deforestation likely began even during the height of Moai construction, meaning the resources required for such transport were dwindling even as the statues grew more ambitious. But then there's another theory that the Moai walked, not literally, of course, but a team of modern archaeologists tested a technique using 3 ropes, one on each side of the statue and one guiding from the rear. By rocking the statue side to side in a controlled rhythm, the moai seemed to step forward. Locals claim that's how the statues always moved, not dragged, not carried, but walked like sacred beings returning to the villages they watched over. Is it possible? Yes. Is it proven? Not entirely, because there's more to the moai than weight and distance. Many of them once wore pukao, cylindrical red stone hats, made from a different quarry, balanced atop their heads like crowns. Some weigh up to 12 tons and would have required precise engineering to lift into place, especially considering that many moai were erected on uneven ground or sloping coastal cliffs. You wander past Ahu Tongariki, the largest ceremonial platform on the island. 15 moai stand here in perfect formation, restored after being toppled by a tsunami in 1960. They face inland backs to the sea, like they're still guarding something. But what? Some say the moai were more than statues, that they represented a kind of energy conductor part of a belief system known as mana, a spiritual force believed to flow through ancestors, leaders, and the land itself. The moai placed atop sacred platforms may have acted as anchors for this energy, stabilizing the island's harmony. And here's where it gets stranger. Some of the moai have bodies. Yes, you read that right. When excavation teams dug around some of the heads, they found that many of them actually have full torsos, buried by centuries of sediment and erosion. Some are up to 33 feet tall. They were never just heads. They were full standing figures, only now hidden beneath layers of time. Why bury them? Perhaps they weren't buried. Perhaps the landscape shifted. Or perhaps the moai were abandoned, left unfinished, or only partially installed as the island's resources vanished. Because something clearly went wrong here. Rapa Nui's population once thrived possibly up to 15,000 people. But by the time Europeans arrived in the 18th century, it had collapsed. Famine, war, environmental devastation. The lush forests were gone. Soil eroded, crops failed, clans fought each other. Moai were toppled not by nature, but by human hands. Was it anger, desperation, the crumbling of belief? Historians still debate the cause, but some believe the moai themselves may hold a clue. You stand before a broken statue, face down in the grass. Its nose chipped, its once proud gaze shattered. And you wonder, did the people who carved these giants lose faith in them or in themselves? And then there are the Rongo Rongo glyphs, carved onto wooden tablets found on the island. Rongo Rongo remains undeciphered to this day. Some believe it's a form of writing. Others think it's proto-writing or mnemonic device. Either way, it's one of the only known examples of a written system independently developed in the Pacific. But like the moai, the tablets stopped being made, the knowledge vanished, and those who knew how to read them were likely lost to slavery or disease shortly after European contact. So we're left with stone faces and unreadable lines, echoes without a voice. You make your way to the edge of a cliff. The ocean stretches out forever. And for a moment, you wonder, were the moai just watching the land? Or were they waiting for something to return? Maybe a boat. Maybe a god. Maybe an idea that never arrived. Rapa Nui is small, isolated, a speck in the vastness of the Pacific. And yet, it holds one of the largest concentrations of megalithic art in the world. Not because of conquest, not because of gold, but because they believed. And even when belief cracked, the stone remained. From the lonely moai of Rapa Nui, You now move inland, vastly inland, to one of the most misunderstood sites on the planet. You're not in the jungle, nor the mountains, nor any place tourists accidentally stumble across. You're in Turkey again, but not in the familiar depths of Derinkuyu. This time, you've arrived at Göbekli Tepe. The name means Potbelly Hill, which is oddly fitting for something so world-changing it looks like nothing at first. A bump on the landscape blanketed in dry grass and goat tracks. But beneath that hill lies a series of circular stone enclosures that shattered everything we thought we knew about the rise of civilization. Because Göbekli Tepe was built before writing, before agriculture, before the wheel, before the pottery wheel even. It dates back to 9600 BCE. Let that sink in. That's more than 11,000 years ago. Thousands of years before Stonehenge, long before Egypt's pyramids were even an idea. This is not a temple built by an advanced agrarian society. This is a temple that predates cities themselves. And yet it is stunningly complex. You step past the site's protective canopy and onto a catwalk overlooking massive T-shaped stone pillars, some over 18 feet tall, arranged in concentric circles. At the center of each ring are two towering monoliths facing each other like sentinels, or perhaps like mirrors. Each pillar is carved, not just shaped, but adorned with reliefs of animals, lions, snakes, boars, birds, insects. Some of them look alive even now, mid-pounce, mid-slither. These carvings aren't crude. They're deliberate, skillful, and symbolic. But here's the kicker. There are no signs of permanent settlement at Göbekli Tepe. No homes, no kitchens, no farmland. Whoever built this site didn't live here. Which begs the question, why build a temple? If you're still chasing your dinner with a stick, historians still debate that. The prevailing narrative once said that humans discovered farming, then built cities, and then created religion. But Göbekli Tepe flips that on its head. Here it seems that spirituality came first. That maybe the desire to gather for ritual, to worship, to observe the sky, to tell stories, came before the domestication of wheat. In fact, some archaeologists believe that agriculture began here not for food, but to feed the builders. The nearby wild ancestors of modern wheat corn grow abundantly around this region. Perhaps people began cultivating it, not out of hunger, but to support workers building something holy. And then there's the most haunting part. After centuries of use, Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried. That's right, filled in, covered up, hidden. Not by erosion, not by nature, by human hands. Tons of earth packed into every ring, preserving the stones with such care that some carvings still feel crisp to the touch today. Why? Why build something so monumental, then bury it? Some say it marked the end of an era, a ritual closure. Others believe the site was used as a calendar tracking celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, perhaps even comet sightings. There's a theory that one of the enclosures depicts the Younger Dryas impact a hypothesized cosmic event around 10,800 BCE that triggered global climate upheaval. If true, it would mean Göbekli Tepe is not just a spiritual site, but a survivor's record. A monument built by a civilization that remembered what it endured and wanted future generations to never forget. You run your hand along the railing as you walk past the enclosures. Beneath your feet are still buried rings. Only a small percentage of the site has been excavated. What lies below is still unknown. Some archaeologists believe there could be dozens more rings waiting. A full-scale prehistoric complex, possibly connected to other mysterious nearby sites like Karahantepe, only 35 kilometers away, which contains similar T-shaped pillars and underground chambers. What if this entire region was once a network of ceremonial spaces, a cradle of myth and memory, echoing with chants that predates all known languages and the people who made it? We don't know their names. We don't know what they called themselves. They left no written words, no empires, no golden idols, just stone. And yet, their work required planning, collaboration, and vision. This wasn't the result of scattered hunter-gatherers. This was architecture engineering and spirituality forged by people who knew exactly what they were doing. You sit on a bench overlooking the dig site, wind brushing through dry grass. Insects buzz. Birds call from far off. The stones don't move. They haven't in millennia, but you can almost feel them listening. They've outlived every god humanity ever named, every empire, every book. They've seen the earth freeze and burn, flood and dry. And they're still here, still waiting for us to remember what they already knew. That before tools, before cities, before kings and war and science and schools, humans looked up and whispered back. You leave the blazing sun of Anatolia behind and head east farther deeper, where the Himalayas rise like ancient sentinels carved by sky itself. But you're not climbing Everest or following well-worn Tibetan paths. No, you descend instead into legend, into shadow, into a place where history and myth blur so completely no one can tell where one ends and the other begins. Welcome to the whispered kingdom of Shambhala. Or maybe not Shambhala itself, but its earthly echo, the subterranean city of Erdstall tunnels spread like veins beneath Europe, particularly in Austria, Germany, and parts of Hungary. You'd expect the world's most enduring underground mystery to live in the east, but no, it lies right under cobblestone villages and wheat fields. You're standing now at the edge of a narrow opening in a cellar floor. From above, it looks like a well or a foxhole. But as you slip through and light your lantern, a tunnel opens around you just wide enough for a person, maybe two, if you're generous, and so low you have to crawl on your hands and knees. The air is still. Your breath bounces off damp stone. The floor curves, and so do the walls, impossibly smooth in places, ragged in others. These are the Erdstall tunnels, a network of thousands of narrow winding passageways carved into bedrock for unknown reasons by unknown people at an unknown time. There are over 2,000 known entrances across Europe. But that's just what's been found. Many were hidden, sealed off, or simply forgotten. No tools have ever been recovered. No bodies, no artifacts, no inscriptions, nothing. Just winding, silent holes in the earth. The tunnels go nowhere, no chambers, no vaults. They twist and loop, some rising, others descending. And often, bizarrely, they include a tight vertical slit, known as a schlupfloch. Think of it like a stone birth canal, a tiny space you must squeeze through on your belly to pass into the next segment. Why? That's the question. Were these secret escape routes, storage tunnels, ritual spaces, initiation chambers? Historians still debate their purpose. The standard explanation says they were medieval hiding places used during war, invasion, or plague. But there are problems. For one, no evidence of habitation, no soot, no food, no human remains. And then there's the sheer effort involved, carving these tunnels by hand in solid earth or rock with no clear reward or function. No one goes through this much trouble just to hide. You crawl farther into the system, the silence now deeper than silence. You turn off your light for a moment, just to feel it. You've never known dark like this. Some theorists suggest the Erdstall tunnels weren't about function, but about transformation, a spiritual journey. The tight crawl spaces, the awkward angles, the disorientation. Maybe it wasn't accidental. Maybe it was part of a ritual designed to mimic death and rebirth. You enter a wider space, now a chamber, maybe 5 feet across. Barely enough room to sit. There are no carvings here, no altar, just stone and breath. The entire system feels inward, not just physically, but emotionally. There's no outpath, no escape route. You go in, you crawl, you squeeze, and then you come out changed, or not at all. Could these tunnels be the remnants of something older? A tradition inherited and distorted over centuries. A reflection of stories like Shambhala, Agartha, or Patala. Underground cities of wisdom, hidden from the world, but accessible through initiation. The similarities are eerie. In Tibetan, Lor Shambhala is a hidden kingdom beneath the Himalayas, ruled by enlightened beings. It is not a place you find by map, but by merit. It is accessed not by path, but by state of mind. The journey is spiritual. But in some stories, there are also literal entrances in the mountains, the desert, or deep underground. You've heard this before. The Hopi speak of underground worlds, two emerging from caverns after the destruction of past civilizations. Hindu scriptures describe Patala, a subterranean realm filled with serpentine beings and ancient knowledge. What if these myths are not inventions, but memories? What if long before recorded history, people understood the earth not just as ground to be farmed, but as a womb, a sacred space, a place to transform, to preserve knowledge, to survive catastrophe? And what if the Erdstall tunnels were echoes of that worldview? You sit in the chamber, the stone pressing against your back. The tunnel behind you curves like a question. The one ahead is a tight shadowed crawl. Some locals believe the tunnels are haunted, filled with mandrakes or little earth spirits who guard the passages. They say if you disrespect the tunnels, the spirits will disorient you, trap you, or worse. You don't believe that, and yet you feel watched, not in fear, in reminder that these spaces weren't made for comfort. They were made to challenge, to humble, maybe even to awaken. You crawl back toward the surface heart, pounding not from fear, but from realization. We build upward now. Always upward. Towers, spires, screens. But once long ago, humans knew the power of going in, into earth, into self, into silence. You climb back into the world of light and noise. The tunnel mouth behind you disappears beneath a trap door. No signs, no fanfare, just a hole in the ground and a feeling in your bones you won't forget. You surface from the European underworld, blinking in the daylight dust, still clinging to your skin. And now you go south, all the way south, past lush forests and ancient deserts, past modern cities and forgotten rivers. You arrive at a place where mystery is wrapped in sunlight and bone. Welcome to Namibia, but you're not here for wildlife. You're not here for dunes or safaris. You're here for something much, much older. You're standing in Twyfelfontein, a site whose name literally means doubtful fountain, and it is appropriately uncertain in almost every other way too. Because what you've come to see are engravings, not drawn on walls, not painted in caves, but etched into rock. Hundreds of slabs stretch across the landscape, littered with carvings of giraffes, rhinos, lions, ostriches, and also stranger, more abstract designs, spirals, grids, foot patterns. At first, it looks like storytelling, then ritual, then perhaps something more. These aren't doodles. They weren't scratched on a whim. They're deep, deliberate, and meticulously preserved. In total, more than 2,500 petroglyphs have been recorded across this region, believed to be over 6,000 years old, some say older. But here's the problem. These engravings seem to be too sophisticated, too spatial, and in some cases too strange for what conventional archaeologists credit to local hunter-gatherer tribes of that time. You crouch beside one panel that shows a lion, not just a lion, but a lion with 5 toes on each paw and a hand at the end of its tail. Another stone shows a man morphing into a giraffe mid-transition. These aren't just depictions. These are transformations. What does that mean? Historians still debate it. Some believe these were shamanic journeys, visions, carved into stone after trance states, spiritual travel across dimensions, dreams, or deserts. Others believe they're simply symbolic of man's connection to nature, but others more quietly ask whether these were maps. Because if you step back, way back, the placement of the images begins to suggest patterns, lines, distances. Some researchers speculate that Twyfell-Fontaine may have been used as an early navigation tool, a geographic record of watering holes, hunting trails, or even astronomical alignments. And then there's the spiral, always the spiral. It shows up again and again on rock, on pottery, in the mines of ancient cultures. A symbol of eternity, the sun, the cycle of life and death, or something that moved. Some of the spiral carvings seem to shift depending on the angle of the sunlight. You wouldn't notice it on a cloudy day, but in the desert, when the shadows are sharp and clean, the image changes. It comes alive. That kind of visual play suggests more than artistic flair. It suggests intentional engineering, a consciousness of light, shadow, and time. Could these stones have been part of a larger observational system? One designed not to tell time like a clock, but to experience time through vision, repetition, ritual. You wander to another ridge and find a petroglyph showing humanoid figures with elongated arms and what some say might be antennas or headdresses. Others laugh and call them just fancy hairstyles, but the figures feel alien, not in the sci-fi sense, but in the deeper way, as if whoever carved them wasn't just copying what they saw, but encoding something. You can't help but wonder, were these real memories, visions, teachings, or all of the above? Nearby, there are more geometric designs, grids of dots and shapes that don't resemble animals at all. Some look almost like schematics, like someone tried to draw how something functioned rather than what it looked like someone wanted to leave behind not a story, but knowledge. This is where Twyfell-Fontaine breaks the mold. It doesn't just ask who made the carvings, it asks what they knew. The Sand People, sometimes called Bushmen, are believed to have created most of the engravings. They were known for their oral traditions, their depth of spiritual connection to the land, and their trance dances. Their descendants still carry those rituals, though the full meaning behind many symbols has been forgotten, or perhaps never spoken aloud in the first place. And yet, the carvings persist. Some scientists believe the very act of engraving stone in this way, using quartz and other hard tools to etch into red sandstone, was part of a ritual. That the energy effort and repetition created a kind of meditative trance in the carver, connecting them to what they were carving about. And it wasn't easy. Each image took hours, sometimes days, to complete. And this wasn't just for one's own benefit. These weren't tucked away in caves. These were displayed in open-air galleries. That implies audience, teaching, or at the very least, memory preservation. You stand under the harsh sun, letting the light bounce off the rock. It almost glows iron red and ancient. Around you, the desert is alive with silence. It presses in like time itself, unblinking, unbothered. And you realize this is a library, not a ruin. No books, no shelves. Just stone pages open to anyone willing to listen. And the language, you don't need to translate it. You just need to feel it. A spiral, a lion man, a hand with 5 fingers, a sun that dances, a line that loops. They are fragments of something older than language symbol, pure and raw. The original code, perhaps the only code that still holds. You take a final walk, past the outcrop's eyes scanning the slopes. There are likely hundreds of carvings here, still unrecorded, hidden behind bushes, buried by sand, waiting for the right shadow to reawaken them. And when they do, they won't say, "Look at what we hunted." They'll say, "This is who we became." From the scorched stones of Namibia, you now drift northeast toward mountains wrapped in mist rivers that coil like silver threads and ruins so forgotten they barely whisper anymore. You're in the heart of China, but not the neon glow of modern cities or the imperial sprawl of Beijing. You're in Henan province, standing on the edge of a history few outside China have ever heard of. Before you rises the mysterious pyramid of Mount Song and the enigma of China's forgotten pyramids. Yes, pyramids, not just one, not just 2. Over a dozen pyramid-shaped structures, scattered primarily across Shanxi and Henan provinces, dot the rural landscape like stone memories of something grand and lost. They aren't tourist attractions. Most are cloaked in vegetation, their angles softened by centuries of erosion. Some are actively hidden by the Chinese government under the guise of forestry conservation. But satellite images don't lie. From above, the shapes are unmistakable. You're standing before one now, the White Pyramid of Xianyang, known to some researchers as the Great White Pyramid. It's rumored to stand over 300 feet tall, making it taller than the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan. But unlike its Mexican counterpart, this one is buried beneath grass trees and decades of red tape. No one is officially allowed to excavate it, but stories persist. The first Western report of this pyramid came from James Gaussman, an American pilot during World War II, who allegedly saw it from his cockpit and described it as brilliant white, almost glowing. His account was followed by a photograph in 1947 by Colonel Maurice Sheehan, who saw the pyramid and claimed it dwarfed the Great Pyramid of Giza. And yet, you won't find this in most textbooks. You walk closer. Local villagers speak of these structures with reverent, sometimes caution. Some say they're ancient tombs built for emperors or kings. Others whisper of celestial emperors who descended in fire and built pyramids to anchor their knowledge to earth. The Chinese government officially acknowledges some of these pyramids as imperial mausoleums, burial mounds for Han and Tang dynasty emperors. And yes, some are indeed tombs, but not all of them, because some of these pyramids predate known dynasties. Some lack inscriptions. Some are aligned perfectly to true north, just like Giza. Some face solstices, star constellations, or follow obscure geometric patterns. One of the most enigmatic lies in Maoling, where the tomb of Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty rests, It's massive, imposing. But the real mystery lies beneath it. Legend has it that the emperor's tomb chamber is surrounded by rivers of mercury, and that the ceiling above him is embedded with pearls mimicking the stars. The idea wasn't just burial, it was immortality, a miniature universe sealed in stone. This might sound mythic until you remember that mercury levels around the tomb are abnormally high, verified by soil analysis. No one's opened it. No one dares. Why? Because in Chinese tradition, disturbing a tomb is taboo more than disrespectful. It's dangerous, not just physically, spiritually. Some believe these pyramids are anchoring points holding in energy, memory, or something we don't fully understand. You walk around the base of one of the lesser-known pyramids. Its sides are weathered, but still geometrically sound. You notice something odd: terraces, flat platforms that suggest multi-tiered design, like a step pyramid. This isn't just a hill. It's architecture, and no one talks about it. Historians still debate whether these structures are simply mounds or true pyramids. But then you notice the orientation. Like the Giza complex, many of them are aligned to the cardinal points with only minor deviation. Ancient compasses, celestial observation, or something else. You remember now that the Chinese were early astronomers. They tracked the stars, recorded eclipses, mapped the heavens. Their oldest myths tell of dragons from the sky, of emperors who ruled with mandates from heaven, and of the yellow emperor who descended from the stars on a dragon chariot and brought civilization. And where did he rule from? Some say from a pyramid-shaped palace, long gone, buried somewhere beneath the soil of Shanxi. You climb halfway up one of the smaller mounds, your fingers gripping the packed earth and overgrown roots. At the top, there's nothing but wind, sky, and silence. But you feel it, something beneath you. Weight. Intention. Secrets buried deeper than stone. There are no signs, no placards, no rope lines, just land and form, and the aching sense that someone built something to last forever. And then time said, not yet. You sit for a moment, and you ask, why build pyramids here? Pyramids are global. We see them in Egypt, Mexico, Sudan, Indonesia, even Bosnia, though that one's still hotly debated. But why would people across the world with no contact build the same shape? Maybe it's simple. The pyramid is stable, ideal for burial. Or maybe it's symbolic. A point rising toward the sky. A link between heaven and earth. A machine not just of stone, but of frequency. Because in many cultures, the pyramid wasn't just symbolic, it was energetic. A place to resonate, to transform, to preserve. And perhaps here, in China's forgotten hills, the pyramids still hum beneath their cloak of green. You descend slowly, brushing dust from your hands, the scent of loam and pine in your lungs. The village below is quiet. No one seems interested in what rests above them. But you heard the echo, and you know, not all pyramids need to be excavated to be understood. Some are meant to lie hidden. Until we're ready, you turn away from China's hidden pyramids, carrying the weight of unsolved geometry in your chest. And now, you're back across the ocean, back to the Americas, but this time, not to the jungles of the Maya or the high Andes of the Inca. You're headed to a wind-swept plateau in Bolivia, where the air is so thin, it tastes metallic, and the sky hangs heavy with silence. Welcome to Pumapunku. If you think you've seen ancient stonework before, think again. From the moment you arrive, nothing quite makes sense. There are no complete buildings here, no towering facades or intact temples, just fragments, massive stone slabs tossed across the earth like toys abandoned by titanic children. But it's not the disorder that captures your attention. It's the precision. You kneel beside a carved stone block, part of what once may have been a gateway or wall. The corners are sharp, the edges are crisp, and the cuts, they're machine-like, smooth as polished aluminum. Grooves, drill holes 90-degree angles that would require diamond tools or high-speed rotary blades today. But this isn't a modern construction site. This is over 12,000 feet above sea level and believed to be at least 1,500 years old, some say much, much older. You place your hand on one of the infamous H blocks, so named because they resemble the capital letter H. These interlocking stones are scattered across the site in various orientations. Each one has notches, grooves, and symmetrical features that suggest they were designed to fit together like parts of a giant modular assembly. But here's the catch: no mortar was used. These blocks were meant to fit with such perfection that not even a hair could pass between them. And that would be impressive at sea level. But up here, with no wood for scaffolding, no beasts of burden, no iron tools, it feels impossible. Historians still debate who built Pumapunku. The site is closely linked to nearby Tiwanaku, a sprawling pre-Columbian complex considered one of the most important spiritual centers in the Andes. Tiwanaku's people were extraordinary engineers, no doubt. They built irrigation canals, agricultural terraces, and complex urban plans. But even they seem confused by Pumapunku, because according to local legend, Pumapunku was built in a single night by giants, or gods, or those who came from the sky. Sound familiar? That's not just a one-off myth. That's a global pattern. From Baalbek to Easter Island, there are whispers of ancient builders with unnatural abilities, people who sang stone into place or levitated blocks through sound and thought. It's easy to dismiss until you stand at Pumapunku. You circle another block and notice something curious, a groove running straight through the stone perfectly, even like it was cut by a water jet. But how the Andes weren't exactly hosting industrial facilities during the Stone Age. No one has found tools that could produce this kind of precision. No chisels, no saws, just the stone blocks themselves, still unsolved puzzles in open air. And the material, it's not soft clay or sandstone. Many of the blocks are made of diorite and andesite, extremely hard volcanic rock. Diorite, for reference, is almost as hard as diamond. You can't shape it with copper or bronze. You'd need tungsten or modern steel. So how did they do it? That's the echoing question. Some theorists argue that the builders of Pumapunku had access to advanced technology, not necessarily modern, but something now lost. Others suggest the use of sonic tools or a form of softening stone, chemically a concept whispered in Inca lore as well. And then there are those who believe Pumapunku predates even the Tiwanaku culture, that it's not 1,500 years old, but 12,000 years old. Built before the end of the last ice age, when the region was more temperate and humans supposedly were still primitive hunter-gatherers. If that's true, then Pumapunku would not just be impressive, it would be impossible, a structure that shouldn't exist. You walk through the debris, tracing invisible lines in the air. Some researchers believe the site was once a grand gateway with megalithic doorways aligned to the solstices and cardinal points. Others suggest it was a platform maybe for ritual, maybe for flight. Well, there's the strangest part. Some blocks bear carvings that resemble circuit diagrams. Others display stylized animal figures that have avian features, some looking suspiciously like aerodynamic shapes. And remember, this is the same region where the Nazca lines lie. Just to the west, those massive geoglyphs etched into the desert, only visible from above. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. As you stand amid the broken geometry, the site feels more like a blueprint than a ruin, like a prototype, unfinished or dismantled, but not forgotten. You close your eyes and picture it towering stone walls, smooth as glass, doorways that echo with wind and ritual, light catching on grooves that glow at certain angles, a place where geometry was sacred not for ornament, but for energy. The Tiwanaku people left no written language, no stone steles explaining their gods or blueprints, just architecture. And architecture, if read correctly, is a language. And Puma Punku, it speaks in silence. It says, we knew, we measured, we built. Then for reasons unknown, we stopped. Some say it was a flood. Others suggest a cosmic event, like the Younger Dryas impact. Whatever happened, it ended the construction suddenly. Stones lie scattered unfinished. One block has a groove started but not completed, abandoned mid-cut, as if the builders simply walked away. You sit for a moment on one of the H blocks. It's warm from the sun. The wind blows high and dry. The mountains watch quietly, and it hits you. The greatest mystery of Puma Punku isn't what was built. It's what came before. Because no one builds like this the first time. To carve stone with this accuracy, to align blocks with this mastery, you need trial and error. You need tradition. You need time. And time is exactly what Puma Punku doesn't seem to have. It appears suddenly, perfectly, then stops, like the last note of a song you'll never hear again. From the jagged ruins of Puma Punku, you descend further into the unknown, not across the earth this time, but into memory itself. You travel south, still into a land wrapped in cloud and shadow, where myth and mountain blend together into something half-seen, half-guessed. You're in Patagonia, at the bottom of the world. This is the land of wind-shaped rock of glaciers that breathe the valleys carved like ancient scars. Few live here. Fewer have explored it. But somewhere within this barren vastness lies one of the oldest legends never proven, the myth of the city of the Caesars, also called Ciudad de los Césares. This legendary city was said to be hidden deep within the Andes, somewhere between Argentina and Chile, and described as a place of unimaginable riches, ancient knowledge, and immortals who never died. Sound far-fetched? Of course. That's how the best secrets start. You sit now beside a glacial lake, watching light shimmer across its surface. Behind you, ragged mountains rise like frozen waves. There are no roads, no signs. But local tribes speak of this place in whispers of a time before time, when shining people lived in stone cities far away from any coast, surrounded by mountains that no map dares name. The Spanish conquistadors searched for it. So did Jesuit missionaries, explorers, adventurers. Some of them vanished without a trace. The few who returned spoke of strange ruins, metal too light for gold, and structures carved into cliff faces that no one could explain. Most historians dismiss it all as legend, wishful thinking, a lost El Dorado of the South. But what if it wasn't a city made of gold? What if it was something much older? You hike farther into the wild terrain, passing valleys so quiet they seem untouched since the Ice Age. And then suddenly, you stumble upon a wall. Not a big one, not a monument, just a curve of fitted stones, too regular to be natural, half buried in moss and scree. It's not in any guidebook. There's no marker, just stone. You kneel, brushing away debris. The construction is polygonal, not stacked like bricks, but interlocked like puzzle pieces shaped to fit without mortar. The kind of stonework you've seen before in Peru, at Sacsayhuaman, at Ollantaytambo, at Pumapunku. What is it doing here? You press your palm to the cool surface. There are faint carvings, not letters, not images, just grooves, flowing lines. Some curve like waves, others are tight spirals. You've seen this kind of design in petroglyphs across the globe, in Malta, in Namibia, in Arizona. Were these symbols of meaning or markers? Some fringe researchers believe the city of the Caesars wasn't just real, it was Atlantean in origin. A colony of survivors displaced after the Great Flood, who carried knowledge of megalithic architecture, astronomy, and stoneworking to the corners of the earth. And perhaps here, at the edge of nowhere, they found a place to remain hidden. The Patagonian region is immense and largely uninhabited. There are valleys no drone has flown over, caves no foot has entered, glaciers that have swallowed entire mountain ranges without a sound. If you were going to hide an ancient city, this is where you do it. You pass through a narrow canyon, wind howling like a flute. Another stone surface appears, this one more collapsed. You notice magnetic anomalies on your gear. Compasses spinning. Devices glitching. Coincidence or deliberate defense. There are also stories here, folk tales of giants. Early explorers describe meeting people over 7 feet tall with broad chests and pale eyes. Some believed they were descendants of a lost tribe. Others that they were remnants of a forgotten species altogether. In modern anthropology, these stories are filed under misidentification or mythologized memory. But what if they aren't? What if the people of this lost city weren't just culturally different, but biologically? Back at the lake, you find another strange formation. Stone steps not new, not clean, but old and weathered, carved into the side of a cliff. They go nowhere now. Erosion has wiped out what they once led to, but they are there. And they were made by someone. Historians still debate whether these formations are natural or human. Officially, there is no known pre-Columbian civilization in Patagonia with the ability to build in stone. Most native tribes lived nomadically or in wood structures, but the stones suggest otherwise. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps this civilization wasn't part of the narrative. Maybe it wasn't meant to be found. Maybe it was never even meant to interact with the world beyond the mountains, and perhaps it succeeded. After all, what better way to hide than in plain sight? If every explorer returns calling it a myth, then it becomes untouchable, unsearchable, and free to keep existing. Some believe the city of the Caesars is still out there, not a ruin, not a pile of rocks, a living place, hidden by terrain, protected by weather erased from maps. Others say it was real, but abandoned centuries ago, a casualty of climate, or change, or choice. Either way, the stones remain. You sit on one watching the sky shift. Condors circle high above. Clouds drag across the peaks like slow ships. You feel very small here, very temporary. But the city, if it ever existed, feels permanent. Not because of its stone, because of its idea. The idea that somewhere tucked into the bones of the world, there was a place where knowledge was preserved. Not for glory, not for conquest, But for later, in case we forgot, in case we needed to remember, you rise, brush the dust from your hands, and walk away from the wall that no one sees. Behind you, the wind sings through the stones, and somewhere beyond the ridgeline, something listens, still hidden, still waiting. From the icy silence of Patagonia, you now drift far, far back, not just in miles, but in eras. You cross continents, timelines, even myths, because this next place, it might not even exist, or rather, it might have existed everywhere. Tonight, you find yourself standing on the edge of a memory so vast, it spans oceans and cultures. You're standing on the ghost shore of a continent lost beneath the waves. Welcome to the legend of Mu, or Lemuria, or the Motherland. The names change depending on who's speaking: Indian yogis, Polynesian sailors, Victorian theosophists, Tamil mystics. But the idea remains the same: a massive advanced civilization that existed before Atlantis, before Sumer, before even the flood myths took shape. You sit near the coastline of southern India, waves crashing softly nearby. Somewhere out there past the horizon is where Mu supposedly sank. The sea looks no different tonight, just water and moonlight. But the story is colossal. According to early 20th century mystics like James Churchward, Mu was once a continent larger than Asia, stretching across the Pacific Ocean. Its people were peaceful, technologically advanced, spiritually enlightened. They built megaliths near the stars and possibly birthed all other ancient cultures. And then, one night, it sank, a cataclysm, an upheaval. Some say it was volcanic, others blame celestial impact. Some even say it wasn't destroyed, but withdrew from the surface world by design. Sound absurd, maybe. But here's the strange thing. Cultures all across the world, especially those ringed around the Pacific, carry nearly identical flood stories, tales of sunken homelands and ancestors who came from across the water. The Maori speak of Hawaii. The Hawaiians remember Kumari. The Tamil texts describe Kumari Kandam, a sunken land south of India. In Japan, legends tell of a vanished kingdom beneath the waves. In South America, myths speak of star people arriving after a great flood, bringing knowledge, stonework, language. Are they all remembering different things, or the same thing described through different tongues? Historians still debate whether the idea of Mu has any scientific foundation. No tectonic evidence supports a continent-sized landmass in the Pacific. And yet, anomalies persist. Underwater structures have been found off the coasts of Yonaguni, Japan. Giant stone steps, pillars, and platforms submerged but sharply geometric. Some geologists say it's natural erosion, but others, they see architecture. In India's Gulf of Khambat, sonar scans revealed submerged ruins, a city like grid roads, and what may be foundations 9,000 years old. Again, some say it's geology. Others believe it could rewrite history. You walk now through the ruins of Mahabalipuram, a coastal temple complex in Tamil Nadu. Legend has it that 6 other temples once stood here until a great wave swallowed them. In 2004, after the Indian Ocean tsunami pulled water away from the coast, locals reported seeing stone structures revealed beneath the sea just briefly before the water returned. Coincidence? Maybe, but the stories persist. Mu is often dismissed by academics as the fantasy of colonial-era dreamers, a convenient myth to explain away the sophistication of non-Western civilizations. But what if the core idea was never about race or empire? What if Mu was a memory, a symbol, of prehistory's lost complexity. Because what's undeniable is this: the older we dig, the older everything becomes. 20 years ago, Göbekli Tepe was a shock. 10 years ago, undersea ruins were fringe theory. Now we have evidence of human construction stretching back over 12,000 years long, before Egypt's Sumer, or even agriculture as we define it. So what else are we missing? You sit at the shore, letting the surf lick your feet, and think about what Mu represents, not as a landmass, but as a possibility. The possibility that civilization isn't linear, that maybe humanity rises and falls in cycles, that each time we build too high, too fast, nature or fate presses reset, and that somewhere deep inside our collective memory we remember, not clearly, not directly, but in stories, in songs, in shapes carved into stone that don't quite make sense anymore. The spiral, the stepped pyramid, the alignment to Orion's belt. You remember those from everywhere now, don't you? The global sameness of ancient architecture, the repeating motifs, the sacred numbers, the alignment with stars. Were these just convergent evolution, or did they all begin in one place? One golden age, one blueprint. You close your eyes and picture it, not Atlantis with its marble statues and sci-fi tech, but something gentler. A society that built in harmony, not just on top of the land. Structures that resonated with frequency. Cities aligned not for domination, but for balance. Maybe they didn't need skyscrapers. Maybe their tools weren't metal, but vibration thought geometry. Maybe that's why we can't find the tools, because we don't know what we're looking for. And when it ended, however it ended, it left behind just enough for us to ask questions. Just enough for us to feel the missing shape in the narrative. Some scholars believe Mu is myth-made metaphor, that it doesn't matter if it was real because it's true in another way. It represents the aching suspicion that we are not the first, that we are living atop the ruins of a much older world, and that every time we build, we are trying to remember how they built. You rise the tide now lapping against your ankles. The stars overhead reflect on the water like scattered pearls. Somewhere out there, beneath thousands of years of silence, might lie stone blocks, staircases, statues waiting. Or maybe not. Maybe Mu was never a place. Maybe it was a pattern. And maybe you're part of its next version. You've reached the penultimate stretch of your journey now, and the wind carries something colder, heavier, as if the earth itself wants to press pause and take a deep breath. You're standing on the shores of Lake Titicaca, nestled high in the Andes, at an elevation so extreme it makes your chest throb and your thoughts slow. The lake is vast, glass-like in some places, roaring in others, and it holds one of the most confounding secrets ever found underwater. Welcome to the mystery of the submerged ruins of Lake Titicaca. At first glance, this doesn't seem like the kind of place where a city would vanish. The lake is remote alpine and sacred to both the Inca and the Tiwanaku civilizations. According to legend, it was here that the first Inca king, Manco Capac, emerged from the water sent by the sun god Inti to bring civilization to humanity. Nice story, right? Except, in 2000, a team of Bolivian and international divers discovered something at the bottom of the lake that turned legend into alarmingly tangible stone. About 600 meters from the shore, submerged beneath the icy waters, lies what appears to be the remains of an ancient temple complex. We're talking about an entire city-like layout, large stone platforms, carved staircases, and arranged standing stones, all estimated to be over 1,000 years old, possibly far older. You walk the shoreline now, imagining the temple in its full form. It would have been enormous, covering over 2 football fields in area, built with stone blocks weighing several tons. Divers reported massive terraces that looked like they were once agricultural platforms, complete with retaining walls. But here's the question. If the ruins lie underwater, that means they were built when the lake wasn't there, or at least when water levels were dramatically lower. And that means the dating is off, way off. Some geologists believe the lake has maintained its current depth for thousands of years, in which case the structures could be 10,000 years old or more. That places them well before the Tiwanaku civilization, before the Inca, before agriculture had supposedly reached the Andes. So, who built it? Historians still debate. Some suggest an early unknown Andean culture. Others think the Tiwanaku simply built it when the shoreline was lower and rising water swallowed it over centuries. But even that feels like an incomplete answer, because the precision of the stonework underwater is striking. The style resembles Puma Punku, with sharp cuts right angles and blocks too heavy to move by hand. And yet no records of this submerged city exist in Incan oral tradition, nor in Spanish chronicles. It's like it was forgotten on purpose. You find yourself kneeling beside a small inlet. The water is ice cold, and when you dip your fingers in, you feel something beyond temperature. You feel weight not physical, but emotional. A kind of ancient grief. Was this a temple that was abandoned, or a place that was intentionally submerged? That's another theory, that these temples built so high in the Andes weren't destroyed by accident, but offered to the gods. Water, after all, is sacred. The lake is called Mama Cocha, or Mother Water, and its depths were believed to be portals to other realms. Could the people of this region have sacrificed an entire city to the water? Or were they fleeing something? You think back to the legends. The Inca believed that Lake Titicaca was the place of first emergence, a cosmic womb where humans were born from stone and light. The Aymara, the indigenous people of the Altiplano, have older stories. Stories about giants who built the first cities before a great flood came and swept them away. Familiar, isn't it? The motif echoes from Mesopotamia to India to the Americas, a pre-flood civilization lost beneath water, erased, except for stone that refuses to dissolve. And maybe this is part of that memory. You walk along the shoreline to Isla del Sol, the largest island in Lake Titicaca. It's a rugged place, carved by wind and footpaths, dotted with terraced hills and mysterious ruins. One site, known as the Chincana Labyrinth, is a twisted stone structure with narrow passages and underground rooms. Its purpose is unknown, but its feeling, you've felt it before. In Derinkuyu, in the Erdstall tunnels, in Göbekli Tepe, that sense of going inward, of journey, of initiation. Some say the labyrinth was used by priests. Others say it housed sacred objects. But it was certainly meant to disorient, to push the traveler to surrender comfort, control, and ego. And when you emerge from it, breathless blinking, you're met with a panoramic view of the lake. Endless blue, like the sky fell and never got up. From here you imagine it all, the temples whole and shining, the water far away, pilgrims climbing from villages below, bringing offerings, whispering prayers in languages we no longer speak. And then one day, the water rises, or the earth shifts, or the sky screams, and all of it is gone. You think of the divers descending into silence, flashlights sweeping over carved stairs, fish darting through corridors built for gods, the sun above blurred by waves, and below A memory fossilized in architecture. Historians still debate whether these underwater ruins are the key to understanding the pre-Incan world. Some believe they represent a missing chapter. Others dismiss them as misinterpretation or exaggeration. But if you've learned anything, it's this. Every time a mystery is dismissed, it tightens its grip. You walk away from the shore, heart heavier, mind wider, because the city under the lake isn't just a ruin. It's a reminder that even at the top of the world, we are still beneath something we don't understand. And now, at last, you arrive at the edge, not just of a continent, but of the entire story. There is no farther south, no deeper unknown. You are standing on the frozen threshold of Antarctica, staring into the blinding white, where science, legend, and conspiracy all come to die or be reborn. This is Earth's most inaccessible place, and somehow, it might also be its most important, not because of what's on the surface, but because of what lies beneath. You stand now on the Ross Ice Shelf. The wind is razor sharp, carving ghost trails across the snow. Your breath freezes the moment it leaves your body. The only sounds are wind boots crunching ice and your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. And yet, people keep whispering about what's buried here. Structures, anomalies, cities. Let's start with what's real. In 2001, using ice-penetrating radar, a team of scientists from the European Space Agency discovered something strange beneath the ice in Queen Maud Land. A grid-like pattern, sharp corners, repeating symmetry buried under 2 miles of ice. Geological formation, maybe, but if you saw the scans, you'd think someone had built something down there. More anomalies followed. Subsurface heat signatures, magnetic oddities, caverns the size of skyscrapers. One area, known as the Wilkes Land Gravity Anomaly, is a massive mass beneath the ice that some believe could be the remains of an impact crater or a sunken structure. And that's just the data we're allowed to see. You think back to Operation High Jump, an American military expedition launched in 1946, supposedly for polar research. It involved 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. Not exactly your average scientific cruise. The official mission lasted a few months, but it ended abruptly. Some say it was due to harsh weather. Others aren't so sure. There are conspiracy theories. Let's be honest. Wild ones about secret Nazi bases hidden beneath the Antarctic ice. About UFOs. About lost civilizations. About tunnels to the hollow earth. You roll your eyes. But you also can't quite look away. Because why has Antarctica been so heavily restricted since then? The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, prohibits military activity, territorial claims, or resource exploitation. It promotes scientific cooperation, sure, but it also locks the entire continent behind layers of bureaucracy and red tape. No other landmass on Earth is treated this way. And then there's the weather. It's not just cold. It's impossible. Winds reach 200 mph. Temperatures drop to 100 degrees. Even drones malfunction here. And yet satellite images occasionally reveal things that shouldn't be visible. Dark shapes, shadowy structures, straight lines cutting through snowfields where none should exist. Are they tricks of light or the edges of something older than the ice? Historians still debate whether human beings ever reached Antarctica before modern times. Officially, it was first spotted in 1820, but there are hints that people knew about it centuries earlier. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, shows Antarctica's coastline without ice. Yes, the map is crude, but it also includes details of the South American coast that weren't discovered until 300 years later. How did a 16th century Turkish admiral get that data? Some claim it's a copy of even older maps, Atlantean perhaps. Remnants of a civilization with global knowledge wiped away long ago. And then there are the myths, the Hopi, the Mayans, the Tibetans all speak of a southern land, a place of origin, a realm of ice and silence where life began and ended. Some say it's where the last survivors of the flood went. Others believe it's where the gods sleep. You walk now across the ice wind at your back, thinking about all of it. The myths, the maps, the satellite photos that vanish after a week, the whispers of forbidden expeditions, teams who drilled too far, dug too deep, and found something they weren't supposed to. And then, silence. Even now, Antarctica is a mystery wrapped in snow. In 2016, buzz circulated about John Kerry, then U.S. Secretary of State, visiting Antarctica during a major global crisis. The timing was strange, the secrecy even stranger. What did he see? What was he told? Of course, officially it was climate research, and maybe that's true. But why do so many people go to Antarctica and return changed? Buzz Aldrin, the Apollo astronaut, visited in 2016 too. He tweeted and later deleted a cryptic message, "We are all in danger." It is evil itself. He was medically evacuated shortly after. Coincidence probably, but coincidence seems to live comfortably in Antarctica. You pause now at a ridge, staring out over a field of wind-blasted snow. Something glints in the distance, a reflection, a piece of old equipment, a mirage, or maybe just your mind playing tricks. You've seen too much, heard too many stories, but you also know this: where there is cold, there is preservation. Stone lasts, bones last. Entire cities could be buried beneath the ice perfectly intact, waiting for the melt. And the ice is melting, not slowly, rapidly. Ice shelves are cracking, caverns are opening, ground-penetrating radar is mapping more each year. What if it's not just about climate? What if we're about to remember something that's been hidden on purpose? Because some memories aren't lost. They're buried. And some truths aren't forgotten. They're sealed. You turn away from the ridge, the wind now biting your face. There's no monument here, no artifact, just white as far as the eye can see. But beneath your feet, a heartbeat, the oldest one on Earth. So here you are, 30 ancient sites behind you. 30 stone-laced mysteries, lost cities, underground passages, and monuments that whisper stories louder than any textbook ever could. From Lebanon's megaliths to Antarctica's buried silence, you've walked through time, not just in miles and years, but in questions. And in all of it, one quiet truth has followed like a shadow. We don't know. You don't know who carved Baalbek stone blocks or how they moved them. You don't know what made the Moai walk, or why Newgrange captures the solstice with such casual perfection. You don't know who built Derinkuyu or when, or why they hit it, or why they stopped. Historians will argue. Theories will rise and fall. Scientific tools will measure and scan and simulate. But even with the best tech in the world, you cannot measure wonder. You cannot carbon date faith, because each one of these places, each structure, temple, pyramid, road, asks not just how it was made, but why. Why shape stones with impossible angles? Why align monuments with stars we only recently rediscovered? Why bury entire cities underground, or beneath lakes, or under ice? Maybe the people who built these places weren't primitive. Maybe they weren't guessing. Maybe they knew something we've forgotten. Or maybe we're not supposed to understand. Maybe these monuments weren't made for us. Maybe they were left behind for us to find, to shake us awake, to remind us that history is not a straight line, that civilizations don't just rise, they circle, they echo. They leave trails behind like breadcrumbs for the curious. You remember the spiral, the one in Namibia, the one at Newgrange, the one at Göbekli Tepe. You've seen it everywhere now, haven't you? It's not just a symbol, it's a pattern. And so maybe that's the point of all this. Not to prove anything, not to solve every riddle, but to feel that ancient hum beneath your feet. To recognize that somewhere long ago, someone stood where you stand now and looked up at the stars and asked the same questions. What is this? Who came before me? And what will I leave behind? You turn off the lights. You sink into your pillow. The world outside fades. And as you drift, you hear it, not words, not music, but the slow rhythm of stone remembering itself. Good night, traveler.